Chapter 761. Hearing that it wasn't far, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. They didn't want to stay in this lousy place for another minute. Green Lantern Hal Jordan volunteered to investigate, and then flew over. 3 minutes later, they saw the roar of fire and the sound of an explosion not far away. There was no doubt that Green Lantern had been exposed. This idiot! Batman cursed in a low voice, but he had to fight. Most of the heroes of justice could fly, and the only ones who couldn't were the Flash, Sea King, and Batman. The Flash was undoubtedly fast. He had added a heating device to his combat suit, so the environment here didn't affect him much. Sea King had the physique of an animal, and he wasn't slow when he ran and jumped. Our Batman couldn't do the same. There were no trees or buildings here, and he couldn't use his hook gun or glider at all. His human speed was nothing. In the sky, Sia saw that he was chasing after them with all his might, and the gap between them was getting wider and wider. Her shoulders trembled as she covered her mouth and snickered. Diana elbowed her, and she hurriedly cast advanced haste on Batman, so that he wouldn't fall behind. Before they finished running 20 kilometers, they saw Hal flying in front with a bunch of enemies chasing behind him. How King melodramatic. That was what everyone thought at the same time. They were supposed to sneak in and observe, then come up with a plan before starting the battle, but now it had become a tough battle. There are 2 big guys, and there are about 500 enemies left, Hal shouted as he ran. Is this what you call investigation? The heroes were speechless as they watched the dust fly behind him and the enemies shouting to kill. The Green Lantern Corps' tactical concept was very advanced. Attack! Superman took the lead and charged out. Diana followed closely behind. Sia took a look and also chased after her. There were a bunch of enemies on the ground, and it was just these guys? They're different from the enemies we encountered before, Diana said curiously. The first ones they encountered were all translucent lizardmen. Later on, the Highspenters became blue skulls. Now, these fellows on the ground were all muscular and powerful. Their skin was as rough as sandpaper, and their large heads were filled with crisscrossing sharp teeth. Their bodies were wrapped in something like animal skin, and they wielded crude cold weapons. Other than the tentacles on their chin, it could be said that they were a completely different species from the Dino people. It was unknown if they had the ability to adapt to the environment and change their genes, or if it was some kind of mutation. The heroes did not want to know. Quick, these 2 big guys are very powerful. Hal saw them and quickly called for backup. Thea didn't know if the 2 big guys behind her were powerful or not, but they definitely looked impressive. With a height of 200 meters and a body made entirely out of obsidian, 2 gigantic stone golems were chasing after Green Light Hal. They had shields in their left hands and swords in their right hands. Wearing helmets and capes, they looked like ancient Spartan warriors that had been magnified hundreds of times. Hal's materialization couldn't hurt them at all. Instead, they were beaten up by the stone men. Superman saw that he was in danger and was ready to help. Clark, leave it to us. Thea could tell that these 2 stone golems were extraordinary. They were definitely magical creations. Were they left behind by an ancient wizard? Fearing that they would be broken by Superman's chaotic punches, he signaled Diana to take one each. Superman didn't care and flew into the battle below. Stop right there. Thea waved her hand lightly at one of the stone golems. 2 gigantic hands made out of magic reached out from the ground and tried to grab the stone golem's legs. At the same time, a huge vine spell was cast. The green vines started to climb up the stone golem's legs rapidly. The stone golem swung its sword to cut the vines and broke the gigantic hands, as if it had done something insignificant. It continued to move forward. As expected of an ancient wizard. Looks like normal methods won't work. Thea was a little depressed. She gathered a torrent of lightning in her hands and threw it at the stone golem from afar. The stone golem was still expressionless and raised its shield to disperse the lightning. Magic shield. The more Thea looked at the two stone golems, the more she liked them. If she took them to a magic school, she would see two giant stone golems on the left and right. It would be so cool. Not to mention, she was also very interested in the stone golem's activation magic. The fact that it could still function normally after so many years meant that the design back then must have been very ingenious. Previously, she had captured two iron golems from the Cold Flame Vatican, but their activation magic was nothing but trash. The two iron golems in front of her were obviously high-quality goods. On the other hand, Diana realized that her lover wanted to take down the two stone golems without losing any damage. She began to give it her all. The Valkyrie's fighting spirit rose rapidly. Ever since she became a god, she had never met an opponent who was on par with her. Even with her courage, she was afraid of Darkseid even before the battle. The stone golem in front of her gave her a chance to vent her anger. Her fists rained down like a storm, but the stone golem did not back down. In the blink of an eye, she had attacked more than 100 times. "Cooperate with me." Sia once again trapped a stone golem with a spell. Diana shook off her opponent and flew to her side, striking the stone golem's knee with a lightning spear. A large amount of lightning struck, causing a slight delay in the magic circulation in the stone golem's body. Then, the Valkyrie threw out the true word lasso with a swish, binding the stone golem tightly. Thea landed on the stone golem's head, which was as big as a house. She slapped the stone golem's head and poured her spiritual power into it, trying to find the control center of the stone golem. It was not difficult. In front of her profound magic knowledge, the stone golem's structure was completely revealed. There were no more secrets. Ingenious. It was really ingenious. In the eyes of modern magic, the control system of the stone golem was not that complicated. It was just that Lucian had ingeniously used a lot of knowledge and skillfully combined them. In Sia's opinion, the power source of the stone golem was somewhat similar to solar power. Stop it! After finding the control center and observing it for a while, she figured out the structure. After a burst of magic power, the stone golem stopped where it was with its shield raised. The two women did the same thing and took down another stone man. Only then did they heave a sigh of relief. The ground battle could only be described as a stalemate. Theoretically speaking, superheroes had an advantage. Although there were more than 500 enemies, they did not have any superpowers. They were purely relying on their physical strength and their cold weapons. They did not cooperate with each other, and could only roar like beasts. To deal with such a motley crowd, people like Superman and the Martian Manhunter could defeat them without suffering any damage. They would not be afraid even if there were several times more of them. The problem was that they did not kill. She controlled her strength and knocked the enemy down with a punch. The enemy rubbed their head and stood up after half a minute. She kicked the enemy away, and the enemy ran back after a while. It was as if no matter how hard he tried, he could not defeat the enemy. No matter how hard he tried, there was no end to it. Chapter 762. Thea had the urge to cover her face. This was the essential difference between her and this group of heroes. She wanted to ask, if the bad guys on Earth could not be killed, then were the aliens human? Could the aliens not be killed? Looking at Batman being besieged by a group of people, his answer was probably still not to kill them. Respectable determination, laughable reserve. Thea could only go down with Diana to help. She put away her holy sword and took out her soft whip. She did not use any skills like Silver Fire. The tip of the whip was like a snake as it constantly coiled around the enemy's neck. On the other side, Diana also put away the power of lightning on her spear and used it like a stick. She fought with the enemies one by one. The sky was bright and dark, and a hurricane swept across the ground from time to time. It was a terrible battle. In the end, the heroes relied on their powerful abilities to wear down more than 500 aliens. It was not that they did not want to continue fighting, but that they had no strength. "Speak, who are you people?" Diana used her lasso of truth to trap the strongest alien and asked. The alien spat out blood and said a word with difficulty. It seemed to be his name. Diana asked a few more questions. The alien's language was almost degraded. He could only express some words like roaring and anger. They've completely degraded, Ray Palmer said somewhat seriously. Thea agreed. These enemies were completely unlike their kind. They were savage and bloodthirsty. It was a joke to tell them about the genetic modification of spaceships. However, many of their weapons were made of aerospace materials. They only bent special steel to make spears and sharp swords. It was ironic. Diana asked quickly. Her face was a little pale. There is no food on Jupiter. For 50 years, they have survived by eating their own kind, so the serious question was whether it was necessary to keep such a hostile race alive. Diana meant to kill them on the spot. Thea naturally agreed. They were no longer intelligent beings if they ate their own kind. What if we send them all to a distant planet? Batman said. Even if we can send them there, have you considered whether the bacteria in their bodies will cause a disaster on the new planet and damage the local ecological balance? Thea immediately retorted. Batman lowered his head and didn't say anything. He seemed to have come to a decision and walked forward with his head lowered. Thea looked at Superman, and Superman hurriedly avoided her gaze. She looked at everyone in turn, and no one dared to look at her. What was the meaning of this? Are you afraid of dirtying your hands? Are you waiting for me to cut you? With a single soul extraction, 500 people would die instantly. It was convenient, fast, safe, and painless. The only downside was that it would make her look evil. The young miss was still very concerned about her external image. Sigh. She shook her head and sighed. None of you want to kill them, and I can't kill so many of them. Let them go. What if they continue to devour their own kind? The Flash wanted to be tactful, but it didn't work. No one could answer this question. The heroes were bound by all kinds of morals. These enemies could not be killed or let go. Diana whispered a few words to Thea. Are you sure you can do this? Thea asked. Diana nodded. As she spoke, she unfolded the lasso of truth and tied up more than 500 people in an instant. Thea drew a complicated magic circle in the void. A huge amount of magic power was mobilized. Her hands emitted a bright light. With a crisp snap, she threw the magic circle on the captives' heads. The two goddesses activated their divine power at the same time. The temptation of Thea's wealth broke the captives' mental defenses. Referring to the brainwashing model of the green lamp, and mixing in many theories that they saw from the old monk on the highest peak, they created a group version of the brainwashing magic circle. At the same time, Diana's lasso of truth allowed them to see their original hearts that had been lost for a long time. It was difficult to maintain one's original heart. Normal people might not be able to see their original heart in their whole life, let alone this group of sinners who were deeply trapped in the mire. At this time, their persistence in their divine position played a role. The ferocious gazes gradually receded. Various memories of the past surfaced in their minds. Many people finally remembered their identities. The organs that had long mutated let out a low sob. Their turbid eyes regained some of the vigor of intelligent creatures. Thea shook her head slightly. These people woke up too late and sank too deep. Of course, she was not a compassionate person. She just felt that there were too few people and the brainwashing effect was not strong enough. Such a subtle change did not give Diana much experience before it ended in a hurry. If they found tens or hundreds of millions of sinners to create a super-large magic circle, Diana might be able to obtain a new divine position. The people of the Alliance did not know what the young miss was thinking. They all applauded their methods. A big problem was finally solved. Leaving behind a group of sinners who were repenting, they walked towards the way the aliens came. Looking at the bloodstains and many utensils in the alien camp, and the dried meat, the heroes were speechless. A group of intelligent creatures had degenerated to such an extent in just 50 years. To a certain extent, civilization was really fragile. Is this the place? They stopped at the entrance of a cave that was 2 people wide and 3 meters tall. The cave was filled with orchids. The weapons that Spenter had mentioned should be stored here. There were obvious large scratches at the entrance. There were many broken limbs. As for the white bones, they were piled up like a mountain. The 2 stone golems were standing here. I wanted to rush into the cave directly, but I was slashed down with a sword. Green Lighthouse said with lingering fear. Thea imagined that scene. It was really exciting. Hal poked his head in to take a look. He thought that the stone golems were just decorations. He did not expect them to be powered by solar energy and had their own warning system. If not for his quick reaction, he would have been chopped up. The stone golems were controlled and the people of Dynamo outside were all brainwashed. This place was already open to the Justice League. The group entered in a single file. The cave was not big, but the interior was cut neatly. This must have been opened up by the first batch of Dynamo people who came to Jupiter. Green Lighthouse saw many lizard statues placed around. He raised his lamp ring nervously. Those are all stone statues. There's no danger here. Thea was speechless. This guy was a disgrace to the 7 Lantern Corps. He had pulled down the average of the Lantern Corps. Is this the world-destroying weapon that guy was talking about? The few of them walked to the end and saw a lizard statue in the center. It was holding a blue energy bar with both hands. The energy bar was flashing with a dazzling light. It was floating there quietly, as if it was waiting for some mission. Thea nodded. This energy bar contained a large amount of energy. If placed on those technologically advanced planets, it could be used as the main energy source for some super interstellar cannon. It was indeed an unparalleled super weapon. The few of them looked around. At least nothing unexpected happened. This trip to Jupiter had come to a perfect end. Chapter 763. There were no traps or traps. The energy bar was in their hands. The old problem popped up again. How should they deal with it? This was obviously a technological energy source. The 2 technological heroes, Batman and Atom Man, fell silent. They really wanted it, but were afraid that they would not be able to keep it safe. If news of it leaked out and some villain stole it, it would be an earth-shattering event. Especially Batman, he immediately thought of the clown. If the clown knew that he had a weapon that could blow Earth to smithereens, it would be a disaster. Forget it, I'll bring it back. Thea reached out and took the energy bar that was floating in the air. The few of them did not object. After all, the battle was over and the hidden danger had been eliminated. There were many things that needed to be dealt with. The disposal of the alien spaceship, the clones that looked exactly the same, the 500 captives who were ready to turn over a new leaf, and the energy bar that could blow Earth to smithereens. Each and every one of these matters was extremely troublesome. Only Thea, who had close ties with various government departments, could handle them. They returned to Earth in the spaceship. The spoils of war were all sent to the administrative committee. The heroes sang their songs and went home, leaving Thea to deal with all the follow-up matters. Diana wanted to run away at first, but under the stern gaze of Thea, she shrunk her neck and stayed to help. Thea felt that the Dynamorians were fated to be Buddhists. According to ancient sayings, they were rather intelligent. Even Spenter had some magical powers. If one ignored his honor, he would have been an eminent monk 1,000 years ago. She went to the highest peak for a stroll. The entire cave was completely sealed by her 2 seals. The 500 captives who had turned over a new leaf were easily dealt with. 200 of them were sent to various construction sites to make full use of their remaining power. The remaining 300 were allocated to Damien Dark. This former Green Arrow Season 4 boss was now a captive of the main female team. He was very talented. Thea took a large piece of land in Nevada. The 300 musclemen were all given to him to plant corn. The 20 or so authentic Demo natives on the spaceship had also been brainwashed by the two goddesses. Much of their knowledge was useful to humans, and they were categorized into different categories and taken away by a few science and technology departments. As for the clones that looked exactly like Miss Voodoo, that was a headache. It was unrealistic to humanely destroy them, and it was also impossible to arrange them into human society or government organizations. There were more than 100 women who looked exactly the same. Even a blind person would know that they were clones. Currently, the issue of cloning humans was still being debated on a moral level, and it was not suitable to be pushed out. Thea waved her pen and decided to raise them first. Those who survived would all undergo special agent training. As for the object of loyalty, it was naturally the Quinn family. The spaceship was handed over to the Scientific Research Center, represented by the Firestorm duo. Thea was determined to obtain the miraculous stealth technology. She had also brought the 2 stone golems to the magic school so that the new students could admire their seniors when they had nothing better to do. "What are you going to do with this?" Diana pointed at the energy bar on the table. Thea held her chin and pondered. She couldn't do it on Earth because it was too dangerous. What about outer space? Outer space was actually not safe, and she didn't want to give it to the Heavenly Father. What should she do? She suddenly thought of a good place, Old Shazan's Stone of Eternity. With the energy bar in her left hand and Diana in her right hand, she brought the Valkyrie to the Stone of Eternity. Old Shazan was locked up by her to absorb his divine power, and the originally deserted building became even more desolate. The Stone of Eternity was still the same as when she left last time, and there were traces of various magic battles on the ground. What do you think? This place is not bad, right? Diana carefully experienced the characteristics of the Stone of Eternity. Even with her calmness, she was dumbfounded. There is a problem with the space and time here, and there is also a strange feeling that I can't describe. Yes, this is the center of the multiverse. I once wanted to move it to our universe, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't move it at all. That was when I discovered the hidden characteristics of this place. The center had nothing to do with the present. She found a box to hide the energy bar, looked around briefly, and then returned to Earth. A crisis caused by the entertainment activities of the Female Righteous Alliance was stopped prematurely. The ordinary people were still living their ordinary lives and were not affected at all. Writing reports, making records, numbering a few pieces of evidence and sealing them up. After going through the entire process, the secrets of the D-demons were locked up in the secret files of the administrative committee. Once the door was locked, it was as if it had never existed. Thea was not interested in Priscilla's original body, but Miss Voodoo deserved her attention. It was a remarkable talent that the guy could integrate striptease moves into battle. It was very suitable for a bard. After basic training as a special agent, she was sent to the current magic school under Master Constantine to learn more advanced theories. In the blink of an eye, it was May. At the end of March, the International Justice League was officially established. The Golden Vanguard was the leader, and the 3 female generals, Female Fox, Fire and Ice, joined at the same time. Following closely behind was the Russian superhero, Red Rocket, and the Iron Mask general from an indescribable country. What was worth noting was that the International Justice League also had a Green Lantern Gardener. He was also from Earth, and was the second choice for Arbin Sue's ring, other than Hal Jordan. Due to the Battle of Darkseid, 4 Green Lanterns who participated in the battle died. 3 of the rings flew away and 1 was left on Earth. Green Lantern Gardener was destined to receive a Green Lantern ring and become the new Green Lantern. The 2 goddesses, Thea and Diana, did not know whether to laugh or cry. Batman also shamelessly joined the International Justice League. Master Bruce used the attitude of, "I'm leading you, you can't reject me," to infiltrate the International Justice League. The International Justice League looked glamorous on the surface, But in reality, there were many internal problems that made one's hair stand on end. There were all kinds of bureaucratic commands, and behind the 7 members were more than 20 leaders. Moreover, their reputation was far from the international justice leagues. Despite the media's promotion, they still could not convince the ordinary people. Female Fox, Fire and Ice had complained to Thea before. If they had known that the internal structure was so complicated, they would not have gotten involved in this mess. The pressure from the people behind the scenes, coupled with the lack of motivation of the members, made the Golden Vanguard very passive. Compared to the dismal debut of the International Justice League, there was another incident that was worth recording in the history book. At the beginning of April, the huge Ibn Trade Association entered the solar system. The government and the military immediately released a statement, saying that this was a peaceful trade group. The people were not stupid. They immediately asked, "How did you know?" At first, they said that it was a secret. Your ranks are not high enough. After that, you spread a bunch of fake and true news, from Apollo's landing on the moon to the recent construction of the Mars base. In short, you gave the public the impression that the higher-ups were playing a big game of chess, and that everything was under their control. Chapter 764. The heroes of the Righteous Alliance ran back and forth to the edge of the solar system and confirmed that Ibn Trade was a commercial alliance. It was safe and harmless. The other party came with peace. The people began to boil. Earth was finally entering the era of the universe. 15 huge battleships carrying a large number of goods and a commercial celestial body transformed from an asteroid slowly entered the solar system. Every day, the people discussed how far the other party was from Earth. Yesterday, they were on Saturn. Today, they should be on Jupiter. What did the aliens look like? Were they as stupid as in the movies? Or did they look like us? Did they wear clothes? What did they eat? All kinds of questions popped up. The government's subsequent actions could be regarded as competent. They responded appropriately and commanded calmly. Moira's support rate skyrocketed. Most people did not know that this was all an act. In the eyes of outsiders, the government's response was so perfect that it could be written in textbook. Many media reporters rushed to Mars and witnessed Moira shaking hands with the leader of the commercial alliance on behalf of Earth. It was worth mentioning that this alien leader looked very much like a gorilla on Earth. Of course, everyone knew that it was impossible. The other party was very kind and knew how to say a lot of witty things. Gorillas on Earth did not have such IQ. Moira knew that this gorilla was her daughter's subordinate. She was not afraid. In front of the camera, she showed the demeanor of a big human country. She was dignified and polite. Jared also knew that this woman was his boss's mother. He was here to act. He put himself in a very low position. His gentle and humble performance won the favor of many media. Superman, who used a reporter's identity to sneak into the scene, felt that this gorilla-like alien was very pleasing to the eye. There was actually such a peaceful alien in this era? The universe was really big and full of strange things. Clark, who had been feeling very tired, eating, sleeping, and fighting aliens every day, as if the universe was full of bad people, reignited his hope. There were still good people in this universe. The Righteous Alliance did not find any problems. Thea knew far more about the light ring than Hal Jordan. The result of the light ring scan showed that Jared was a real alien. The group of people who did experiments with the U.S. military and reverse lightning had seen Jared before. However, the face of a gorilla was almost the same in the eyes of people. Jared had changed from a small gorilla to a gorilla. Even if he kept his original size, the Americans would not be able to recognize him. Jared landed on Earth with a small landing ship and gave a keynote speech on the peace of the universe at the United Nations headquarters. This was in line with the spirit of the current theme. The representatives of the two sides quickly negotiated a bunch of trade agreements. The Ibn Trade Association established 3 trading points on Earth, one in Asia, one in America and one in Europe. Large amounts of extraterrestrial resources, technological equipment, and weapons had entered the human race's field of vision, and they only traded various minerals, steel, and fuel. In an ancient manor located in the embrace of trees, today's tranquil time was broken by the continuous sound of brakes. Many small animals among the trees did not know what was happening in this area today. They hid in their own tree holes and shivered as they watched the humans coming in and out. "Big brother, look at my holographic watch, it's so cool. It's completely controlled by brainwaves. I dare say that Earth's technology won't reach this level in 20 years. A young man was showing off his new watch to the people around him. This kind of thing happened more than once. Many people in the manor were talking to each other. Large amounts of extraterrestrial technology had entered their field of vision, and the first to benefit were naturally the wealthy. "You're still buying yachts? How lame. I'm already using the magnetic airship." "What? You said that this dress was personally tailored by an international master?" "My dress can make people fly, can you do it?" Young people who loved to show off gathered together and showed off the new items they had obtained, enjoying the admiring gazes of others. This caused them to unknowingly become intoxicated and unable to extricate themselves. The younger generation gathered together and chatted. Those who were popular were talking loudly, and those who did not have much knowledge were clapping and cheering. In contrast, the older generation closed their doors and discussed the future. "We received news from Trade that they are preparing to sell 10 space battleships from a Level 5 civilization. What do you think?" The white-haired patriarch of the family asked a few elders of the branch. Families that had lasted for hundreds of years would always have a lot of nonsense to deal with. In order to avoid meeting each other with submachine guns and drinking water, they lived in different places. When there was a big matter, they would gather together and pretend that they did not know each other. This was the only way. However, the arrival of Trade had broken many traditions. It was very necessary for them to gather under the same banner and discuss the future together. The family needs to move forward. If we don't, we will die. I feel that we should wait and see. The current situation is not clear. Wait and see? Have you seen the star map provided by Trade? There are only a few planets near the solar system that are worth attacking. Let's wait and see. Have you thought about the other families? The group of elders had not finished speaking and were about to quarrel. The old patriarch, who was leading the group, sat steadily and did not move. He waited until they finished quarreling before slowly saying, "We may be able to wait, but our descendants cannot wait." The family's policy of controlling the world behind the scenes does not satisfy them. They want cheers, applause, and worship from the people. However, the current system cannot give them these things. The old patriarch's words caused the few elders to fall silent. Their branches all had this problem. The elders considered more and were overcautious when doing things. The young people were born with a silver spoon in their mouth. It was very troublesome for them to sit on a large amount of wealth but not know about it. It was not difficult for the young people to choose whether to continue being a wealthy person on Earth or go to an alien planet to become a tyrant. They could forcefully suppress one or two of them, but if the entire younger generation stood together to oppose, they would have to compromise. After all, they could not kill all the heirs. The DuPont family is one step ahead. I heard that they are mobilizing a large amount of resources. They might even be able to take down a battleship before the military. You must know that our Earth is only a third-class planet according to the universe's standards, but that battleship is a fifth-class one. The old patriarch sighed. A space battleship was too good, so good that he could not sleep. We don't have that many resources. Can we use currency to exchange for some with other families? The old men had wolf-like personalities. When they saw something good, they did not want to let it go. If others had it, they wanted it too. The Quinn family has always been a steel company. Previously, steel was their main business during Robert's time. After that young lady came to power, she wantonly bought many energy companies. The mother and daughter pair have a large amount of resources in their hands. What are their opinions? An old man with triangular eyes asked. Chapter 765. The old patriarch sneered when he heard Quinn's name. President Quinn wants to finish her term and leave behind a glorious name. Humph, a woman blinded by fame. As for her daughter, she is a superhero. Of course, she will take it as her duty to protect the people of Earth. What a ridiculous idea. Just let them watch over Earth. Ha! The remaining people also laughed with different characteristics. In their opinion, they had seen through everything. The actions of Quinn and her daughter were simply ridiculous. It was unwise to let go of the huge benefits and be tied down by fame. The triangular-eyed old man suggested that there was no need to buy it. In the dark night they could just take people and snatch it. A group of people despised this idiot who spoke without thinking. Who was that? That was an alien. Their technology was hundreds of years ahead of Earth. Even if they managed to snatch it, no one would know how to drive it. A giant battleship tens of thousands of meters long was not a bicycle in front of the door. With a huge amount of materials in exchange, the other party promised to teach, provide all the learning materials, and provide food and accommodation until they learned it. If they wanted to snatch one, who would teach them? The families quickly reached an agreement. They wanted what other families had. There was nothing to say. Buy it. Thea certainly knew what they were thinking. All of this was the result of her secretly pushing. She knew the young people's thoughts too well. Using their psychology, a strong barrier would always be broken from the inside. When the arrow was on the bow, they would have no choice but to retreat. They spent a huge amount of money to buy the space battleship. They couldn't open a theme park at home or take young models to have sex in it, right? Weren't they greedy? I'll give you a big pie. Let them take the space battleship with their families' materials and children to explore the outer space. This was her plan. Did they really think that all the aliens in the universe were as polite as Jared? We were lying to you, all right? When Jared was angry, even he was afraid of himself. If these wolves won, they could share the pressure of Earth. If they lost? If they lost, then so be it. It had nothing to do with Thea. Things were not unexpected. Several families took out their 100 years of savings to exchange for space battleship. Thea also helped by controlling a lot of media to speak wantonly, comparing the interstellar era to the great voyage of the past. She encouraged the ordinary people to resist the rich people's illegal actions of taking the lead. The more ordinary people said so, the more the hidden families were motivated. The more they said it was impossible, the more they did it. In the end, they boasted of being the Magellan de Gama. Under Thea's secret command, the major families bought 6 out of the 10 warships, while the major countries in the world only bought 4. With such a huge amount of wealth exposed, their seclusion policy could no longer continue, and they could only return to the spotlight. Every day they had to deal with all kinds of verbal and written criticism. Finally, a month later, the DuPont family led a huge escort team and advanced weapons to attack a planet not far from the solar system. The civilization there had just entered an agricultural society. Faced with the advanced weapons of the Earthlings, they had no power to fight back and were beaten to a pulp. The news of the first victory was secretly sent back to Earth, and the big families were very encouraged. Under the instigation of many young heirs, several great clans set off for the starry skies one after another. Humph, those old bastards are finally gone. Thea sat in her office chair with her legs crossed. Driven by greed, the big families abandoned Earth like it was a pair of worn-out shoes, leaving only a small number of people to watch over their homes. They majestically charged into space, and one of the families even shouted that their target was the Sea of Stars before they left. In order to strengthen their confidence, Thea first revealed a few planets that were both strong and weak, but they were all within an acceptable range. The strong ones were in the era of gunpowder weapons, and the weak ones were in the era of cold weapons. With the elites of the big families and all kinds of mecha and extraterrestrial weapons, it was no problem for them to flatten those planets. As for what happened after that, Thea could only maintain a limited amount of attention. To her, Earth was the most important. There was no reason, no logic, this was the center of the universe. For the same trade, if the divine power provided to her on another planet was 1, it would be 10 on Earth. Those families thought that Earth's environment was terrible and polluted, but they would never have thought that this place was important to Thea, Diana, and even Darkseid to the multiverse. This was caused by the difference in altitude. She did not use violent means to get them to leave voluntarily. Even the stranger ghost, who spoke for God, could not say anything. What she did was in accordance with the rules, be it official or unspoken. Of course, they did not get a total of 6 fifth-level spaceships for free. They had to shed tears and sell everything they had to buy them. Real estate, stocks, energy sources, and all kinds of resources that the big families had monopolized for hundreds of years were all in Thea's hands. She only paid a few spaceships, and these spaceships did not belong to her in the first place. They were snatched by the Yellow Lantern Corps and Death Knell. "Tell me, how much did we get this time?" she asked the secretary. The secretary's tone was very excited as she reported to her with a thick stack of documents. Quinn Group's shares were recovered by 17%, Wayne Group's shares increased by 19%, Rhodes Technology 26%. In addition to the above-mentioned companies, you have added 19 pharmaceutical factories, 14 aircraft manufacturing companies, 9 shipping companies, and 13 media companies under your name. Krupp Company, Springfield Munitions Factory, Beretta Company. You hold a lot of shares in all of them. You have more than half of the shares in 12 of them. The rest of the properties, islands, private castles, oil fields, and real estate around the world are still being calculated. And we paid for all the steel, oil, and rare metals in Quinn Group's inventory. Speaking of this, the secretary laughed softly. She was also a member of the Green Lamp Gang. She had cut off her connection with Luther. Recently, her relationship with Poison Ivy had improved by leaps and bounds. Of course, she knew that Sia had gained something from her left hand to her right hand without any loss to herself. Instead, she tricked a group of greedy fools into risking their lives in the universe. There were too many dangers in the universe, and these people would be finished in a few years. All their wealth had changed hands, and even if they came back, they would be poor. If she told her real thoughts, Thea would laugh at her. Come back? What a joke. In 2 years, it would be the darkest night. It would be a catastrophe for the entire universe, and these people's chances of survival were slim. Sigh, it seems like a lot of money, but it's just a number. Of course, Thea would not sleep with a pile of money. She wanted to add this part back into the wealth cycle and redistribute the wealth of society. The top of the pyramid had been completely emptied. Using the government as a cover, she slowly returned the wealth accumulated by these families for hundreds of years to the people. This was what she needed to do in the future. It was impossible to completely eliminate poverty, but she could make most people live better and richer. In the next few days, she began to work with Moira. The government introduced a lot of policies to encourage and support the manufacturing industry. Many low-tech alien products were copied by human beings. The rich used the original alien products, and the poor ordinary people used the counterfeit products. Thea would not say that this was a trick she learned from the counterfeit mobile phones in the indescribable country. The heavy manufacturing industry directly increased the employment rate. Many people suddenly found that their income had increased a lot. The idle people were pulled to work in the factories. They did not need a degree. As long as they had brains, they could support themselves and buy houses and cars. Many ordinary people did not know what had happened. They only knew that after the aliens came, life on Earth suddenly became better. Chapter 766. The big shots were playing all kinds of games, and the small ones also needed to survive. Jenny was a young girl from Arkansas. She was young and beautiful, and she thought that she was very capable. She wanted applause and cheers, and she ignored the opposition of her family. With an indomitable spirit, she rushed into the Vanity Fair of Hollywood. Unfortunately, an ideal was still an ideal, and reality made her bleed. Not to mention becoming a big star in Hollywood, she couldn't even touch the door of Hollywood. She could only work as a hostess in the nightclub. In the early hours of the morning, Miss Jenny walked back alone with heavy makeup, wearing a cheap dress and high heels in her hand. "Gina, you stupid pig! Go and work as a worker. When I become a big star, you will regret it." Miss Jenny drank a lot tonight, but she still kept a little sober. She scolded her roommate as she walked. As a member of the bottom rung of the Hollywood pyramid, there were countless people like Miss Jenny. Her current roommate was originally in the same situation as her. Although they didn't have a deep friendship, the two of them still had some common topics to talk about. But everything changed last month. Gina gave up her dream of Hollywood, washed off her heavy makeup, took off her earrings, and went to work in a small factory. She was as tired as a donkey every day, but her income was 10 times more than Miss Jenny's. This made her both envious and jealous. When the other party invited her to work together, she flatly refused. "Are you kidding? I came to Hollywood to be a big star. Do you think I have nothing better to do than to work in a factory? I might as well go back to Arkansas to farm." As an ordinary person, she didn't know why the manufacturing industry suddenly burst out with such a huge amount of energy. Not to mention her, even those promising young people, who often came to the nightclub to have fun, couldn't figure out the relationship behind it. Whenever she saw customers fiddling with alien technology products, she could only look on enviously. She didn't know anything about the big shot. She only knew that she couldn't afford those technological products with her meager income. Miss Jenny, who did not have any academic qualifications and was only focused on getting rich and famous, was even less clear about the complicated logical relationships here. She only knew that due to the huge demand of the manufacturing industry, there was a rare round of labor shortage. Even the nightclub she worked at had a few of her sisters taken away. As the only remaining employee, her workload had increased tremendously. In the past, he could still throw flirtatious glances at people who were suspected to be Hollywood actors and leave a note. Now, he was as busy as a spinning top and had no time for that. Why is this King country so busy all of a sudden? Ouch. Everyone was busy, so naturally, fewer people came to play. Her daily income, which accounted for a large portion of her daily income, plummeted. She angrily kicked a rock, only to realize that she wasn't wearing shoes the moment her foot touched the rock. The result was self-evident. She could only sit on the ground and rest while hugging her legs. Everyone was exhausted. Most people chose to go home and sleep after a tiring day. Naturally, no one came out to rob them. Compared to a month ago when single women could not walk at night, the security on the streets was unprecedentedly good. Miss Jenny, who had great ambition but little talent, sat on the ground, hugging her feet. She wanted to curse, but she did not know who to curse. While she was in a trance, she noticed that a room was flashing with a faint light, and she could faintly hear someone calling her. He passed by this place every day. Had he ever seen this house before? After drinking a lot of wine, Miss Jenny felt dizzy. After thinking for a long time, she felt like she had seen him before, but she also felt like she had never seen him before. "Shall we go in and take a look?" "Please don't go in. What if there are ghosts inside?" All kinds of thoughts appeared in her mind. Miss Jenny subconsciously felt that something was wrong, but there seemed to be a voice tempting her to go in and take a look. Anyway, she had nothing. If she found a treasure, wouldn't she be rich? That's right. I don't have anything with me. There's no need to worry. Jenny did not know if this idea came from her or if it was forced on her by the outside world. She did not hesitate and pushed the door open and walked in. The interior was very well furnished. It was like a rich man's house. She had never seen a real rich man's house before, so she could only refer to the things she saw on TV and the internet. The floor was covered with a gorgeous carpet, and there were expensive oil paintings hanging around. Walking through the magnificent corridor, Miss Jenny looked around as she walked. Her curiosity was like a cat, tightly clenching her chest. She did not dare to breathe too hard, afraid that she would break something if she exhaled too hard. "Hello, is anyone here?" she said softly, her voice so soft that she could not hear it clearly. Just when she thought that no one would respond to her, a thin layer of fog rose from the stage not far away. The light smoke surrounded the body, and the fog dispersed like a light cloud. A languid woman appeared from within. "Customer, is there anything you need?" There was a faint layer of gray on the woman's skin, but it was easily ignored. Her voice was too seductive. Even though she was also a woman, Miss Jenny felt her heart beating faster. "Me?" she stuttered. She did not dare to say that she came in to see if there was anything cheap here. "My name is Siren. Is there anything you need? We can buy and sell anything here, hee." This languid woman was naturally Thea's creation in the Sea of Souls. She was a demigod banshee siren, a mixture of soul god power, wealth god power, and art god power. In order to promote economic circulation, well, at least that was what Thea thought. Since she had nothing to do, she sent the Banshee Queen out to do some small business. "Don't be nervous. Sit down and eat something." The Banshee waved her hand and a huge dining table appeared. All kinds of exquisite food that Miss Jenny had never seen before were placed on the table, waiting for her to enjoy. "Can I eat?" After drinking with the Banshee Queen for half a night and being worried for half a day, Miss Jenny was really hungry. After receiving the siren's signal that she could eat as much as she wanted, she grabbed a drumstick and started eating. She had never been to a Michelin restaurant before, but she felt that her mouth was filled with joy. It was too delicious. She ate in a daze and drank a bowl of soup at the end. Her thoughts were simple. Since she did not have the money to pay, she would just owe the Banshee Queen. The siren did not care about her petty thoughts. The demigod Banshee maintained a smile. "Customer, is there anything else you need? Would you like to make a deal with us?" Thinking that she had taken advantage of the situation, Miss Jenny regained some of her rationality. She asked uncertainly, "What kind of deal?" She wondered if these people were selling organs. Should she run? Cars, houses, weapons, superpowers, anything you can think of is within the scope of our deal. The siren saw her confusion and continued, "Of course, your deal includes everything you have, money, resources, and even your life and soul." Chapter 767. At first, Miss Jenny was a little cautious, but in the end, she almost laughed out loud. What a joke! Soul? It was the 21st century now. Aliens had already entered the Earth. How could anyone still believe in souls? Was this charming woman a fool? Or was she not a fool? Was she also a Hollywood person? Was this luxurious house actually a reality show? Intelligent beings were used to interpreting everything with their own worldview. Miss Jenny was now in a strange circle. She classified everything that was wrong here as an act. The house belonged to the production crew, and the carpets and sculptures were all fake. This seductive woman also wanted to be a big star. The previous meal was most likely a smokescreen used by the production crew to let him eat a big meal as a reward. In fact, there were countless people hidden in the dark watching his performance. Now that he thought about it, everything made sense. This was a large-scale reality TV show. Realizing that the scene of her eating was seen by so many people, Miss Jenny was a little annoyed. She had to salvage the situation. "Can I really exchange anything?" As if she wanted to show off her acting skills, she was suddenly full of courage and asked fearlessly. The siren was a little surprised. This human was scared like a quail before. Why was she trembling now? However, as long as the transaction was completed, she did not care about the details. She nodded naturally, as long as the customer says so. Miss Jenny lowered her head and pondered. If she said that she was the king of the world or something like that, she would definitely become a joke. She did not want to leave the impression that she was shallow and ignorant. $1 million. Do you have it? She pretended to ask casually. The siren nodded, yes. She took out a check from the drawer and looked at the amount before putting it on the table. Miss Jenny reached out to take it. The siren held her hand with a serious face. I need your transaction item. What do I have that is worth $1 million? Miss Jenny chuckled. This crew was quite serious. It was most likely a big production. It was easy to be fooled if one did not know the inside story. She thought that she had succeeded and said, Didn't you say that souls could pay? How many souls do I need for $1 million? The siren's eyes glowed. The soul is the source of your life. If you want to complete this transaction, then I need to strip some essence from your soul. It is equivalent to 10 years of life. It would be a lie to say that Miss Jenny was not afraid. Under the mysterious atmosphere, she felt her hair stand on end, but she suppressed it with the idea that the film crew was good at creating a scary atmosphere. She wanted to appear calm and collected, so she said in a tone as if she had seen through everything, Do you still need to sign some documents, parchment or something? A hint of mockery appeared in the depths of the demonist's brows. My master is the god of wealth of souls. The methods of a mere demon are far too inferior. No, I'll explain it clearly. If you don't mind, this is yours. Siren pushed the check over. Miss Jenny felt as if she was about to lose something. Before she could think about it, her eyes were attracted by the check. She had met a few young talents in the nightclub who squandered money like water. She had seen checks before. She directly reached out and grabbed it. Using her knowledge, she looked at it for a long time. She felt that this check seemed to be real. But how was that possible? Sir, do you need anything else? No need. Thank you. I'll leave first. Miss Jenny felt that the film crew most likely used the wrong prop and gave her a real check. She hurriedly ran out of the house. It was not until she ran out of the street that she turned around to look. Seeing that no one was chasing after her, she held the check tightly to her chest and ran back to the rented house. In a place where she could not see, in a luxurious room, Siren bowed to the air. Master. The young mistress took a step forward and received the soul shadow from the siren. It was fragrant and abnormally agile. Compared to the stinky smell in Karen's river Styx, this was a true soul. Those in the river Styx were all souls of the dead. The trade deity position was compatible with the soul deity position. By using souls as a transaction item, she could absorb a part of the soul essence from a living person and observe the process of the soul from birth to death. She could use this to spy on the death deity position. The most important point was that she was testing the spirit's bottom line. In fact, the spirit boss did not care about this at all. Her principle of fair trade was also one of the rules. The spirit that abided by the rules would not stop her. Pick 100 people from your tribe and send them to different parts of the world to help me collect souls. Thea finished and returned to her house, leaving Siren to continue fooling people. Thea was very careful. She could only take a maximum of 30 years of life from a person. The decay of the soul would only appear at the end of the life. Large-scale deaths and diseases would not happen at all in a short period of time. In her opinion, this was a completely fair trade. Take Miss Jenny as an example. She might not even be able to get 1 million even if she worked hard for 10 years. To a certain extent, she had made a profit. However, in order to prevent superheroes from coming to clean up the place, she set up a magic barrier that could only be seen by the frustrated people in the trading house. Fiddling with the soul essence in his hand, the sparkling and translucent mist-like gas circled around his fingers. The life aura was endless, mixed with the memories, emotions, and thoughts of the original personality. Everything was in the soul. Unfortunately, this was the soul of an ordinary person. Under her gaze, it turned into dust in less than 3 seconds. Thea felt a little regretful. She needed more pure souls with spiritual energy for her to understand. After receiving the order, the sirens went all out and selected 100 people to go around the world to fool people. In just 3 days, she collected 92 soul essences. The most was 10 years, a few were 20 years, and only one was 30 years. Some traders did not believe it at all and thought that it was an act. There were also some who believed it and even wanted to peek into the details of the trading house to get more. It was a pity that a group of ordinary people were either erased or thrown out casually in the face of the banshees, who could be first-line villains in the city. They also traded a variety of things. Most of them wanted money, weapons, health, and one who had been in Hollywood for several years felt that he was not talented enough and wanted to change his artistic talent. As the price, he paid 30 years of his life. Their requests were all met by the trading house. Soon, the news that a room that would grant all requests had appeared all over the world began to spread in the underground world. Anything that could be bought and sold became a hot topic for a long time. A large number of soul essences were collected. Whenever Thea had a new idea, she would take out the soul for verification. As long as she got one of the 2 positions of life and death, her realm and strength would be improved. Chapter 768. Early in the morning at the White House, Missy yawned as she walked out of her room. Her mother, Moira, had been busy for quite some time. "Thea, take a look at this document." Her mother handed her a thick stack of documents. She quickly flipped through them. The DuPont and the other families feel that their population is too small? That's easy, I was just thinking that Earth's population is too high. Thea sighed as she read. Even though these families were blinded by greed, in the face of huge profits, they really burst forth with 200% of their strength. Under the Alliance, they occupied 5 of the 7 planets outside the solar system. The original civilization suffered heavy losses, and the intelligent life was enslaved and killed like the Native Americans. Under the rapid expansion, not only were the young people cheering, even the old people couldn't help but be inspired by the continuous victories. Everywhere they looked there was money, but even a tiger would sleep, and the enslaved intelligent life was not weak. They would resist, and no matter how advanced the technological weapons were, they would still die if they were stabbed in their sleep. A few big families pulled a spaceship back to Earth to discuss with the government. They needed weapons, energy, and more importantly, people. The situation of overcrowding in the prisons was finally solved. Thea didn't need the government to intervene. She instructed Death Knell to open up all the connections and use money to bring the criminals who couldn't be taught to the outer space and sell them to the big families. It wasn't expensive at all, just a few melons and 2 dates would do. The free cooking system couldn't change the nature of these criminals. Now, the big families who were already somewhat like slave owners needed these people to help them reclaim the wasteland. Whips and iron rods could be used to reclaim their personal value. As for running, the spaceship was controlled by the families, and the criminals could only unite around the big families in the outer space where enemies were everywhere. Blackgate Prison and Belgrave Prison were all swept by Death Knell, and thousands of them were loaded onto the spaceship. If the people didn't report, the government wouldn't investigate. Not only was it tiring to manage these people, it was also dangerous. There were cases where they would stab a few prison guards to death with a toothbrush. Now that there was money, the government pretended not to see. No one cared where these criminals went, from the prison warden to the old man who cleaned up, no one said a word. With many policies and money, the social order was unprecedentedly stable, and the crime rate instantly dropped to the lowest point. The group of people were exhausted, but they were all very happy. Their income had increased several times compared to before. Robbing a burger shop with a gun? You must be joking. I don't have the strength to do that. Thea only paid attention to the macro level and did not pay attention to the details. During the transition period of society, pain was inevitable. Just like Miss Jenny, who had been frustrated before, a policy could not benefit everyone. Thea believed that she had minimized the losses, so she did not feel guilty at all. He worked hard to refine old Shazan's godly power and studied the usage of the godly power of the soul. During the weekends, he would spar with Diana. His days were pretty good. When he entered the Sea of Souls again, he took away all the substances related to Darkseid's godly power. The sirens had reported to her that humans had extracted substances from the sea. Thea also felt that the total amount of godly power was not right, but she could not trace it. Humans had too many dark technologies, and she could not figure out who did it. Diana's twin swords were tainted with the most basic Omega effect, and Darkseid's blood was also rich in it. Thea studied it for 2 days, but she had no clue. This was far beyond her understanding. Perhaps this was why Darkseid had been able to suppress the Heavenly Father. She returned the twin swords to Diana and sealed all the godly power and blood away. He would study it when he reached a higher level. You got off the plane? How's the weather in Cambodia? Wet and rainy? Haha. Diana wanted to learn more about Buddhism, so she carried a travel bag around the world alone. Thea was so busy that she could only call her every day to show her concern. On the other side of the world, Diana hung up the phone happily. A girl beside her elbowed her. Boyfriend? The war goddess answered with certainty, girlfriend. Wow. No matter what their real thoughts were, the rest of the team exclaimed enviously. She had met this team in Phnom Penh. There were 2 men and 2 women. They said that they were university students who were traveling during the holidays. Their destination was Cambodia's tourist destination, Angkor Wat. Diana felt that they were not telling the truth, but she did not mind. She had also used a spell to hide her face, so there was no need to talk about who was lying. Sister Diana, hurry up and follow them. The girl named Cassie urged her to hurry up. She was a couple with a handsome young man named Desir. The other man and woman were Lawrence and his sister, who were also their friends. The 4 of them seemed to have an ulterior motive, but Diana did not care too much. When the 4 of them asked her name, she casually told them that she was Diana. This name was everywhere, so she was not afraid of being exposed. Although they tried their best to hide it, Diana still found them pointing at a map when they were camping. A treasure map? The war goddess shook her head gently. These were young people who had watched too much TV. She wanted to leave the team and travel alone, but the girl, Cassie, kept asking her questions. Diana felt that this girl was not a bad person. The 2 of them unexpectedly hit it off, and they could chat for half a day about any topic. Although she was not as knowledgeable as Thea, Diana was still a deity. Her knowledge and experience were vast, so she easily won Cassie's respect. In Cassie's heart, this sister Diana was a complete scholar. The 5 of them drove for 6 hours in 2 cars, and under the guidance of a guide, they entered the Angkor Wat complex. Angkor Wat was built in the 12th century. It was famous for its magnificent architecture and detailed relief. At that time, Hinduism was prevalent throughout the Indochina peninsula. In the local language, Angkor Wat was the temple of Vishnu. Vishnu was one of the 3 main deities of Hinduism. Brahma was in charge of creation, Shiva was in charge of destruction, and Vishnu was in charge of protection. His incarnations often changed into various images to save the world. It could be said that his doctrine was the closest to Diana's creed. Unlike the few of them who were just looking at the scenery, Diana carefully observed the rhythm left behind here. As a deity, she could feel that Vishnu had come here before, and most likely held some activities such as lectures. Many of the stone slabs and bricks inside the building were left with the insights of the predecessors. However, few people today could understand Sanskrit. The wisdom of the predecessors was thrown aside, and the magnificent buildings were valued. Diana was not the god of art. She did not care about how beautiful these buildings were. She moved like the wind and looked at the experiences left behind everywhere. She absorbed and learned from those that fit her own path and innovated. She also secretly noted down those that did not fit for future reference. Chapter 769. Sister Diana, come on, these elephants are so fun. The young girl, Cassie, sat on an elephant and waved at her. Thanks to her rich knowledge, she answered all the questions along the way. The other 3 young people who were looking for treasures were also waiting for her. Diana shook her head and chuckled. Thea had 2 small elephants at home, and that was a little fun. The elephants in this tourist attraction were dull and had been tamed to the point of numbness. What was so fun about them? Instead of riding with them on the same elephant, he found one that looked a little more spirited, stepped on the pedals, and with a nimble somersault, he mounted it. The power of the goddess was not just for show. The elephant felt a fear that struck its heart, and its limbs went soft. It almost knelt down before her. Fortunately, Diana comforted it with her divine power in time, so it did not attract the attention of the tourists. Let's go to Mount Bakken. In the excited cheer of the young girl, the 2 elephants walked forward slowly. Mount Bakken was a small hill in the main ruins of Angkor Grotto. It was the only commanding height in the vicinity. On the hill was the ruins of a temple of Angkor Grotto. It was the first national temple built in the era of Yeshu Varmo I, after the area near Angkor city of Great Wu became the capital. It laid the foundation of the later architecture of Angkor Grotto. The scenery was unique and the view was broad, so it was the first choice of many tourists. The 5 of them rode slowly up the hill, and the whole complex of buildings was in sight. Cassie's boyfriend, Desai, seemed to care about Diana and asked her if she was tired, whether she needed rest, and so on. In the end, he pretended not to care and asked a few questions casually. In Diana's view, these questions were at least questions that could be asked by a professor who specialized in ancient Hindu history. She was a little curious, but she did not ask more and gave the answers very quickly. Desai thanked her profusely and left, leaving his girlfriend to talk to Diana. What is your boyfriend studying? You guys are not doing anything illegal, are you? In fact, Diana had always disliked Americans. They took themselves too seriously, and at the same time they did not take other countries seriously. The biggest characteristic was that there were countless people who broke the law abroad. You're always talking about the democratic spirit of the United States Constitution. Is there a need to talk about this in someone else's territory? In her opinion, these young people were here to rob Wu Cao, split the money, and enjoy themselves. This was the habit of many young people in the United States. They were not ashamed of it. Instead, they were proud of it. They thought that it was cool and handsome. Even when they were middle-aged and old, they could still brag to their children about how they were in the past. Bad values were passed down from generation to generation. Diana felt that Casey's nature was kind, and she needed to guide her on the path of kindness instead of slowly degenerating into a criminal. At this moment, Casey also felt that her boyfriend's so-called treasure hunting plan was a little beyond her expectations. She thought that it was just for fun so that she could brag about it with her friends in the future. But now, no matter how she looked at it, it was strange. However, her love for her boyfriend made her suppress the doubts in her heart. She told Diana that everything was normal. The Valkyrie was not an inflexible person. In addition, she had been hanging out with Thea for too long, and her acting skills were somewhat similar to Stanislavski's. Naturally, she skipped the topic and changed the topic. The next day, at dawn, seeing that they were packing their bags, Diana said goodbye to them. They told each other to take care and exchanged contact information with the young girl Cassie. Diana carried her bag and walked towards another road alone. When the young people saw that Diana had disappeared at the end of their sight, they packed their bags and hurriedly walked in the other direction. Little did they know that Diana took a detour and walked back. Her magic skills were not as good as Milady's, but she still knew how to use a basic invisibility spell. She watched from afar as they constantly adjusted their direction and finally stopped in front of a very old temple. This was the outermost area of the entire Angkor Wat. Even the children begging for food would not come here, let alone tourists. The young girl, Casey, was anxiously talking to her boyfriend, but Desser decisively pushed her away. He then cut his palm and smeared his blood on a very ordinary stone pillar. There was no earth-shattering noise, nor was there any gorgeous curtain. The four of them simply disappeared into the air. Damn it! It's a teleportation spell. Diana cursed in her heart. She should not have watched. She should have stopped them in time. No longer hiding her tracks, she flew over. Before the teleportation energy disappeared, she took the opportunity to sneak in. After breaking through the water ripple-like spatial barrier, the first thing that came into view was a dim yellow sky and a blood-red ground. The temperature in the air was very high, and in the dense mist, there were faintly discernible strange figures moving not far away. It's like a small plane of hell. Following Thea, Diana was now much more knowledgeable than in the original timeline. She just glanced around and determined her location. She was not worried about herself. Even if she could not find the exit, she could rely on the mother box to return to Earth. She was worried about the few young people. She looked around with her clear eyes. The few young people were nowhere to be seen. She could only search in one direction. Behind a small slope tens of kilometers away, Desser and Casey, the young couple, were lying on the ground. Casey's body was much stronger than ordinary people. She woke up the fastest. She shook her head and slowly got up. When she saw her boyfriend lying unconscious not far away, she hurriedly ran over. Desser was shaken by her a few times and slowly woke up. Looking at the different atmosphere around him, his eyes became more and more spirited. It's here. Yes, it's exactly the same as what was recorded in the book. Desser nodded enthusiastically and kept talking to himself. Casey was frightened by her boyfriend's strange behavior. The air here made her very uncomfortable. It was a warning to her soul, telling her to leave this place quickly. She cried and begged her boyfriend to find the exit. What do you know? This is the sealed land of the gods. If we can get what's inside, we can also become the best. Desser saw that his girlfriend was just crying, and he really loved Casey. He thought about his words and took out a palm-sized notebook. This is a record passed down from generation to generation in my family. My ancestor came to this land during the Age of Exploration. He learned about the legend of the sealed land from many locals. It was said that there was an unparalleled power that could destroy the world. Unfortunately, he was just an ordinary person, and the door to the mysterious world was never open to him. I thought that I would be mediocre for the rest of my life, working in a garage. I didn't expect fate to favor me. Look at this. As he spoke, he took out a tattered piece of parchment. The young girl, Casey, took it in a daze. She looked left and right but could not understand the crooked words on it. Chapter 770. This was exactly the effect Desser wanted. Did you know this is magical text, magical text? This piece of paper fell into the market along with a pile of books belonging to the Rockefeller family. I don't know why these large families would abandon so many of their treasures to the market. I only know that it recorded some of the essays of the great alchemist Magnus. In the eyes of ordinary people, it was worthless, but it helped me decipher the secret treasures left behind by my ancestors. Desser held up the notes and parchment. The records of our ancestors, the interpretation of the magical text, and the knowledge of that Diana. All of these together allowed us to reach this place today. This is the arrangement of fate, you shouldn't resist it. As if the words that had been bottled up in his heart for a long time were finally spoken, his eyes emitted a strong obsession, or perhaps it could be called fanaticism. Casey didn't know why her boyfriend had become like this. After all, last month they were still discussing about getting married once they reached legal age, researching about the mortgage, and whatever alien trade was too far away from them. Casey didn't understand the relationship between her boyfriend and the Rockefeller family. She only wanted to know how her originally peaceful and happy life had become like this. "Follow me." Desser looked at the dusky sky. He was actually a bit scared, but he forcefully suppressed his fear and checked the surroundings with the notes, indicating for Casey to follow him. "Aren't we going to look for the Lawrence siblings?" "Why would we look for them?" Desser asked in a cold tone, as if Casey had said something stupid. Casey's face was full of helplessness. She could only follow her boyfriend as they walked through the scarlet ground. Desser kept checking the notes. He walked faster and faster. If it wasn't for the unknown power in Casey's body, she would have been shaken off long ago. "It's here, it must be here." In front of a deep pit, there were 5 stone pillars surrounding each other. Desser looked at the patterns on the pillars, as if he had found some kind of treasure. He used all his strength to kick down a stone pillar, but he was afraid that it wasn't safe enough, so he used all his strength to knock down all 4 pillars. He hurriedly ran down and tripped over a stone on the road, but he didn't care as he rolled and crawled into the pit. "Desser!" Casey stood at the edge and shouted. The warning in her heart was on the verge of exploding. She really didn't want to go any further. Desser turned a deaf ear to his girlfriend's call. He rolled all the way to the center of the deep pit. His hands were like a windmill as he crazily dug into the ground. From time to time, he would mutter, My baby, I'm coming." His movements were very fast. In the middle of the deep pit, he dug out a blood-red gem. The stone was as big as a watermelon. It had a bumpy surface, but every edge of the stone was sparkling and translucent. Inside the stone, there seemed to be a dense and splendid cloud of fire moving around. Desser held the stone with a sacred look. His eyes were filled with expectation, as if he was looking at an extremely precious treasure. Neither of them saw that when Diesel picked up the gem, a black mist emerged from the deepest part of the ground and slowly wrapped around Diesel's body. "Ah!" Desai hugged the jewel and looked forward to his future. Tycoon, president, king, emperor? Who would have thought that a sharp spike would emerge from the gem and pierce his palm with a pu sound, shattering his beautiful dream? He hurriedly let go of his hand in pain. The gem retracted its spike and didn't fall to the ground as he expected. Instead, it strangely floated in the air. The red cloud inside the gem circulated even more intensely, as if a red ink was wantonly dancing in the air. After absorbing a bit of his blood, the ruby became even more resplendent. Fragments of light scattered in the halo, illuminating the area within a few thousand meters. "Don't!" Desser saw that the ruby ignored him and flew towards Casey. He suddenly thought of something. He was jealous and regretful. His heart hurt as if it was dripping blood. The ruby disintegrated in the air and turned into a set of deep red armor. The surface of the armor was covered with sharp spikes. It was filled with a murderous aura. From afar, it seemed to contain an evil charm. Under Desser's hateful gaze, the armor disintegrated into a dozen pieces in the air and pounced towards the young girl, Casey. "Casey, dodge! Casey, dodge!" Desser and Diana, who arrived late, roared at the same time. Although their motives were different, their words were unexpectedly the same. The young girl, Casey, reacted half a beat slower. When she wanted to dodge, the ruby had already turned into a meteor and collided with her. The young girl, Casey, only had time to let out half a cry of surprise before the second half was drowned out by the intense pain. The last thing she saw was her boyfriend's cruel gaze. Her vision turned black and she fainted. "No!" Diana shouted. She had already seen that although the armor had spikes on the outside, there were also spikes of the same length on the inside. If you want to hurt others, you have to hurt yourself first. This was very similar to the thorny belt of the ancient ascetics. They used a barbed belt to tie the armor to the body, constantly reminding themselves to absorb strength from pain. Unfortunately, she was too far away and was one step too late when she flew over. Shoulder pads, arm guards, leg guards, cloak, and helmet were all equipped in less than a third of a second. The deep red armor was firmly rooted in Casey's body. Large amounts of blood flowed out from the gaps in the armor. The originally dim armor was nourished by the blood, and its color became even brighter, as if it was plated with a layer of dim light. "Casey, hold on, I'll get you out." Diana couldn't be bothered to teach Desser a lesson. She reached out to take off the armor, but her arm was stopped halfway by the deep red vambrace. The helmet emitted 2 rays of light. Diana's aura soared. Casey was now completely unconscious and had become the armor controlling the human body. This armor was nothing in her eyes. She raised her strength to 30% and wanted to forcefully pull Casey out. Placing her wrist on the armor's shoulder pads, Diana was ready to tear them apart. The crimson armor's reaction wasn't slow. It lowered its shoulder and retreated, at the same time punching out with its right fist. Diana didn't back down. Her jade-white palm was as fast as lightning. She placed it on the shoulder pads and was about to use her strength to tear this piece off. Unexpectedly, a flashing crimson lasso flew out from the armor's left hand and coiled around a distant boulder like a snake, nimbly dodging Diana's sure-kill attack. "The treasure is mine, it has to be mine. You can't take it away. I found it after much effort." Desser's body was hunched and he staggered out of the deep pit. His body was covered in black gas. His gaze was blurred as he looked at the crimson armor in the distance, ignoring the strange aura on it. It was as if he was looking at his true love. Diana, who was about to give chase, stopped in her tracks. There was something wrong with this young man. Something was very wrong. Such dense evil magic power wasn't something a normal person could control. Chapter 771. Realizing that things were getting out of hand, Diana had no choice but to put on her armor and take out her swords. One of them was unconscious, and the other seemed to be possessed by a demon. She no longer needed to hide her identity. Desser growled like a wild beast. Along with the pain on his face was an irresistible power. An ordinary person had crossed the demigod level and reached the true god level in front of Diana's eyes, or it could be said that he had the power of a true god. Diana looked at the shadow behind him. It had horns, white hair, 2 pairs of evil eyes, and dark red skin that seemed to be able to overturn the universe. Even though she had never seen it before, both Thea and Raven had told her about it. It was the 3-Palace demon. "It's just a projection." Diana was relieved after identifying it. Thea had told Diana many things about powerful beings in order to strengthen her belief. According to Thea's estimation, the 3-Palace demon was stronger than Darkseid. It was hard to tell how much stronger they were, but they were definitely stronger than Zeus. Thea had been weak back then, and she had not seen much of the world. Now, she could be considered a master. Looking back at the sealed 3-Palace demon, she instantly understood that it was not the real thing. It was at most a clone. Connecting the memories, it was impossible to guess that the sealed 3-Palace demon was the clone summoned by the cultists on Earth. If Raven Lowly was the daughter of the 3-Palace demon, it would be more accurate to say that she was the daughter of the clone. If the real 3-Palace demon entered a plane like Earth, it would definitely cause the universe to explode. In other words, the house was too small and its body was too big. Back then, Sia and Raven had sealed a doppelganger, and its strength should be on par with Darkseid's doppelganger. The one before Diana now was at best a projection of the doppelganger's doppelganger. The war goddess was not afraid. She had no problem fighting a mere projection. Of course, the best solution now was to summon Thea to help. But she did not want to do that. The problem in front of her was caused by her, so she had to solve it herself. The only problem was whether the crimson armor would find an excuse to escape if he was held back by the 3-Palace magic projection. Fortunately, luck was on her side. The ancient armor that had suppressed the projection of the 3 demonic palaces for thousands of years, even if its spirituality had been tainted by the demonic aura, it still remembered the mission that it was created for. The red lasso swung and attacked the great demon. Desai was completely demonized, and the 3 palaces behind him slowly faded away. This didn't mean that he had worn them away, but that the transformation of Desai's body was almost complete. His originally handsome face was distorted beyond recognition. There were horns protruding from his forehead, and there was another pair of eyes above his eyes that seemed to be struggling to open. The human hand was the first to complete the transformation. A blood-red light flashed, and a giant hand wrapped in black gas moved like lightning. It grabbed the lasso and pulled in the opposite direction, wanting to pull the crimson armor over. Diana naturally wouldn't let go of this opportunity. She pulled out her 2 swords and slid towards the demon's legs. Divine power covered the 2 swords. Just by looking at their sharpness, one could feel that they were unstoppable. The 2 swords danced and cut through the air. The projection of the 3 demonic palaces didn't dare to be negligent. His shoulders and legs didn't move, and his body moved 3 meters to the left to dodge the attack. As if seeing Diana's power, he let go of the crimson armor's lasso. He waved his hands repeatedly, stirring up a monstrous amount of magic. With a push of his hands, a blood-red light spurted out, and a torrential amount of magic surged forward. Facing a torrential amount of magic, Diana didn't dare to underestimate it. However, retreating and dodging wasn't her style. Even if she was facing an undefeatable enemy, she still had to face the challenge head-on, not to mention that this guy in front of her wasn't that strong. Putting away her 2 swords, the Valkyrie raised the power of the silver bracelet to the extreme. With a loud roar, she used all the divine power in her body to smash the sea of magic. A 10-meter-wide passage was opened in the turbulent sea under the impact of the golden divine power. The Valkyrie didn't stop there. She turned into a strong light and punched the 3 demonic palaces through the sea. The demon, who was at a disadvantage, was still burning with magic flames. At this time, his body had already been transformed. His 4 eyes were looking at Diana, flashing with an evil light. The air within a few hundred meters was so heavy that it was almost stagnant. Diana often sparred with Thea, so it wasn't like she hadn't seen eye attacks before. She stepped on the ground with 1 foot and used the force to fly up. She pulled out her sword and slashed down. The 3 demonic palaces weren't surprised that his eye attack was dodged. His body suddenly grew a lot taller. Crimson magic flames enveloped his whole body. His steel-like hand grabbed the sword and exerted force in his palm, wanting to throw her away. The Valkyrie did a backflip and pulled out her sword. At the same time, she took out her lightning spear and thrust it at his arm. Boom! A crisp sound rang out. Lightning had a great restraining effect on demons. When the 2 sides suddenly made contact, it was like a thunderclap. The 3 demonic palaces finally took a step back in the battle. Diana was unforgiving. She waved her spear and aimed it at the demon's head. The Valkyrie was confident that this move could take down the demon. She was very careful with her moves. She mostly used the side of her spear to hit the demon. It would be best if she could shake the demon away from Desser's body. After that, no matter what she did, she would be able to move freely. Unfortunately, a crimson lasso wrapped around the tip of her spear. She had used up all her strength, so she hurriedly increased her strength. The 3 demonic palaces relied on the lasso's delay to dodge the fatal blow in a split second. Damn it! Diana was a little angry. This broken armor couldn't distinguish between good and bad, causing her to miss a good opportunity. The demon silently laughed, his eyes filled with ruthlessness. He waved his hand and pulled down 2 meteors from the sky, smashing them towards Diana. At the same time, he spat out a red light from his mouth. The red light scattered in the air and turned into a red cloud. As the haze filled the air, he crazily released all kinds of magic related to fire, darkness, and earth. Diana wrapped herself with divine power. With the spear in her left hand and the shield in her right, she nimbly weaved through all kinds of magic. She was a little anxious. Desir, with his human body as his foundation, wouldn't be able to hold on for long. But no matter how anxious she couldn't rush into the range of the 3 demonic palaces. Every time she was about to approach, she would be interrupted by the crimson armor. She was obviously very strong, but she couldn't display it. This made her suffer. Fortunately, the 3 demonic palaces couldn't completely control the armor. The more he tried to control it, the faster the armor's self-awareness would recover. At first, Diana was fighting 1 against 2, but slowly, it became 2 against 1 between Diana and the crimson armor. But when the armor's magic power was overused, the 3 demonic palaces' control would gain the upper hand. It would turn around and attack Diana again. This cycle was endless. Chapter 772. Among the 3, Diana was the strongest, but she didn't dare to kill 2 ordinary people. She was clumsy and the fight was a little ugly. The 3-palace demon was the most experienced, and also the most cunning. He repeatedly foiled Diana's attacks, and even countered the Valkyrie's attack with a punch. And the crimson armor was swaying left and right in the middle, helping this and that one moment. Diana used the remaining force of the 3-palace demons' punch to fly out of the battle circle, and with a wave of her hand, she sent a ball of her golden divine power into the armor. She wanted to awaken the young girl Cassie in the armor. In fact, Cassie had already been awakened by the intense pain. Every jump and attack of the armor was like stirring her body. Fortunately, she had a different physique than ordinary people, and the armor's barbs were for training, not for killing. The armor would return a portion of her power after every action. Otherwise, if she wasn't an ancient monk, she would have died long ago without a body as tough as diamond. In a daze, she looked at the battle outside like an outsider. Seeing her new friend Diana wearing the armor and wielding a spear and 2 swords, Cassie knew that her new friend was the superhero Wonder Woman. However, Cassie didn't have the intention to ask for an autograph. She only felt that this was a nightmare, and she hoped that she would wake up soon. Diana's divine power helped her. Warmth, sunshine, and many other precious qualities. Perseverance allowed her to gradually return from the perspective of an outsider to her own body. Cassie, can you hear me? Cassie, it's Diana. I need your power. Pull yourself together. Persevere. Control this armor. You are the master. Make it act according to your orders. You can do it. Diana's voice was hazy at first, as if it came from the horizon. Then, it slowly became clear, and Cassie finally understood the situation. I can't do it. It doesn't listen to my orders. The young girl wanted to control the armor, even if she could only control a finger, but her body was as stiff as a rock. Her nerves, bones, and muscles were like someone else's. Her orders couldn't be transmitted to her body at all. The young girl couldn't speak, she could only shout in her heart. She wanted to tell Diana loudly that she was just an ordinary girl, not a superhero. She didn't have such strong beliefs. However, Diana acted as if she didn't hear her. Her warm words kept encouraging her and encouraging her. She was like an elder sister, but more often than not, she was like a mother looking after her child. You can do it. Hang in there. You'll succeed soon. I have confidence in you. Under Diana's constant encouragement, the young lady Cassie mustered the courage to control her body several times, but she also failed several times. There were no sarcastic remarks, no strange gazes, only the usual support and encouragement. Cassie's heart was heavy. She did not want to betray this trust. Try hard and fail. Try again and still fail. Persevere. Continue to persevere. The girl, who had always gone with the flow, never thought that she would one day have such a strong belief. Ah! A cry that came from the depths of his soul finally came out from his mouth. The armor seemed to have realized the strong change in its host. It handed over control and fell silent. "Cassie, you're amazing!" The girl heard a familiar voice. It wasn't a telepathic conversation, but a voice that was transmitted through the air, through her eardrums, and into her brain. "Me!" Looking at the crimson armor on her arm, she was a little stunned. "Come and help save Desir. I believe you can do it." Diana interrupted her daze. Desir? It felt like something that happened a century ago. It took her a while to remember that he was her boyfriend. At that moment, countless information entered her mind. Cassie's eyes flashed. She already understood. These were the armor's instructions, or perhaps it should be called the armor of silence. The flashing red lasso drew an arc in the air and wrapped around the Tri-Palace demon. The great demon revealed a ferocious smile. His gaze pierced through the armor, through the flesh, and looked directly at Cassie's soul. What a terrifying gaze! It was filled with monstrous hatred and all negative emotions. Cassie's mental defense that she worked so hard to build was quickly collapsing. Fortunately, the young rookie quasi-hero was not facing the great demon alone. Diana had already seen this scene. She admired this little girl. She took action a little later because she wanted to use this opportunity to train her character. She wanted to guard against arrogance and impatience. The armor was not omnipotent. The key was still in one's heart. A strong heart was the key to victory. "Demon, look at me and say your name." Diana threw out her lasso of truth just as Cassie's lasso was about to be broken. She had trapped Desir's body. According to the rules, the Tri-Palace demon could only say the original owner's name. The result was not surprising. The original Tri-Palace demon could resist the lasso of truth. There was no doubt about this. This clone projection was far from it. Desir. The moment the name was said, the Tri-Palace demon projection was kicked out of Desir's body by the power of the rules. Diana did not have time to look at the unconscious youth. She took out the thunder spear and threw it at the projection that had just left the body and had yet to fully condense into a form. Boom! With a loud explosion, the Tri-Palace demon projection was blown into pieces and disappeared from the world. Diana only heaved a sigh of relief when she could no longer see the shadow. Desir. The young girl Cassie could only call out her boyfriend's name from a distance. She was afraid that the spikes on her body would hurt her boyfriend. His body is just too weak. He will be fine after some rest. Diana checked and said with certainty. The air here is very bad. I placed the Lawrence siblings not far away. Let's leave this place first. Diana carried Desir and found the other two people who had been unconscious until now. She opened the sonic tunnel and returned to the place where they had left. They avoided the sight of the tourists and found their own car. Diana used a gem sealed with a powerful healing spell on the three of them. Desir was the first to wake up. He looked straight at Cassie, who was wrapped in armor. Even if he did not see her face, he knew that she was his girlfriend. However, he did not say a word. He looked at her coldly and drove away alone. Looking at her boyfriend, who drove away alone until he disappeared from her sight, the young girl Cassie's emotions finally emerged from the bottom of her heart. She was very sad. She understood the look in her boyfriend's eyes when he left. It was full of resentment. He hated why the armor did not choose him. He hated how she could get something for nothing. He hated her to this extent. The original emotional connection had long disappeared. Cassie did not think that she could go back to live a normal life with her armor. Since her boyfriend wanted to leave, she would let him go. Chapter 773. They're about to wake up, do you want to talk to them? Diana pointed at her other companion and asked. No, they're all Desir's friends, it's better if they don't see me like this. The girl's voice came from within the armor, a little distorted. Then come with me first, let's see if I can solve your current problem. She could barely use invisibility, but Diana's teleportation was sloppy and ordinary. Instead of teleporting, she preferred to fly by herself. She didn't dare to teleport with others. The two of them ran towards the dense forest on the other side. Looking at the trees rapidly receding in front of her eyes, and the air being compressed by her high speed, creating wind resistance, Casey, who was running to her heart's content, felt a burst of joy, but when she thought of her future fate, she felt an inexplicable sadness. Now I'm also considered a superpower user, right? Everyone wants superpowers, even a girl who likes to fantasize is no exception, but the price to pay for superpowers is a little too high, Casey thought self-deprecatingly. Can I fly? Looking at Diana flying close to the ground, the girl Casey tried her best to forget her worries and diverted her attention to ask. Diana didn't know the answer to this question, but she explained some of the key points of flying, like Thea, who used magic to fly, and Superman, who used physical strength to fly. The girl's perception wasn't low, as she ran while thinking about the few situations that Diana explained. At first, she could only jump, but as she slowly understood the flow of air, her body seemed to become lighter and lighter, and in the end, she actually staggered and floated. "Haha, I can fly!" The girl was overjoyed, and the haze in her heart finally dissipated by half. Diana was also very surprised. This girl's talent was unexpectedly high, and it wasn't unreasonable for the armor to choose her. After a few more experiments, the girl wearing the armor had strength, speed, endurance, reflexes, and flying ability that far exceeded a normal person, and had no shortcomings in any aspect. If trained well, she would be a great hero in the future. Diana once again strengthened her confidence. After running at high speed, the two of them found a secluded forest. Diana sat cross-legged on the ground and gestured for Casey to sit as well. "Do you know who I am?" she asked first. After learning how to fly and running for a while, Casey, who was depressed because of her boyfriend's departure, recovered a lot. She nodded and said, "Superhero Wonder Woman Diana Prince, I've seen reports about you on the internet." Then, she seemed to have thought of something. "I heard that you're the lover of the first daughter?" Diana had the urge to cover her face. "You're already like this, yet you're still so gossipy?" However, this girl was very fond of her, so she couldn't bear to scold her. "You're right, but don't change the topic. Let's return to your question. I won't covet your armor, but can you take it back now?" The girl's tone was a little dejected. "There's only combat information in the armor. It doesn't say how to retrieve it." Diana proposed that she would like to check herself, and the girl said that she could do as she pleased. After checking for a long time, Diana taught her a few secrets to restore her state of mind and tried to help her take off the armor. Unfortunately, the armor was completely connected to her body, as if it was a part of her body. It couldn't be taken away just because she was calm. Diana tried to take it apart by force, but it was useless except for making the girl roll on the ground in pain. "I don't have a way. If you don't mind, my lover might have a way. If it doesn't work, she can also seal your armor," Diana said after some consideration. The half-grown Casey agreed readily, but her tone was a little uncertain as she asked, "Is it Miss Thea Quinn? Do you need to go back to America?" "I'm afraid I'm—" Diana waved her hand. "I won't go back. Get out of the way. Watch my great summoning." The call ended. The Azure teleportation spell flashed, and Thea stepped out. It wasn't clear on the phone, so the two goddesses told each other everything from beginning to end. "You only noticed that she's extraordinary. Nothing else?" Thea asked playfully. The Valkyrie was confused by her lover's question. She shook her head to show that she didn't know. If I'm not wrong, she's your relative. Judging by her bloodline, she's Zeus' granddaughter." Thea had absorbed a lot of Zeus' divine power. She was sure of this. This was also the main reason why the armor chose the girl over Desir. Their physical attributes were on a completely different level. Diana was a little surprised, but not too surprised. Zeus' 1-meter-tall household register didn't change at all. He had too many children. Don't tell her this, Diana reminded her softly. She emphasized her wish to take her as a disciple. Thea didn't mind. The two girls quickly talked about the three-palace demon. The projection of the three-palace demon is so powerful? Miss Casey, does your armor have a name? Thea gave a thumbs up to the Earthlings who were good at courting death. Did they have nothing better to do, so they summoned a demon for fun? They didn't want the low-level ones, so they summoned the fiercest one? After listening to the story, she didn't comment and turned to ask the girl Casey. Casey was a little nervous when this super beauty suddenly asked her. Thea knew that Diana wasn't fighting, so she didn't change out of her armor. Instead, she wore casual clothes. Thea didn't bring any jewelry. She wore an off-shoulder beige dress with a pair of 5-centimeter high heels. It wasn't overly sexy, but it was graceful and gorgeous. She didn't feel out of place walking in this barren forest in such a beautiful outfit. Miss Casey, who didn't have high standards for clothing, didn't know that it was the influence of wealth and divine power. She only felt that the first daughter exuded a noble aura. It says it's called the silent armor. Casey scratched her head after saying that. Then, she felt stupid like an ugly duckling. She hurriedly put her hands down. Silent armor? So she's Diana's disciple in the original timeline, the magical girl? Thea nodded to herself. The Valkyrie also talked about the purpose of summoning her. She wanted to see if the armor could be removed or retracted into her body. If it didn't work, she would seal it. In short, it shouldn't affect Casey's daily life. Thea used her magic to scan the armor from front to back and left to right. She lowered her head and pondered for a moment. This armor was specially made by the ancient heroes to deal with the three-palace demon. It had a strong sense of sacrifice. In the eyes of the ancient people, once they put on this armor, they wouldn't rest until they died. They had no intention of taking it off. However, this wasn't a problem for her. The characteristic of ancient magic was its grandeur. Its external appearance was that it was tall and full of power. It was far inferior to modern magic in terms of refinement. Even if it wasn't the original method, Thea still found a loophole in the armor. She spent half an hour drawing a modern magic circle for the armor. Casey followed her instructions and successfully retracted the armor, or at least a part of it. Chapter 774. The shoulder pads, chest pads, and helmet of the silent armor were all retracted, leaving only the arm pads and leg pads outside. The rest of the armor became a red tights worn on her body. Your compatibility with the silent armor is not high enough. When you two are indistinguishable from each other, it can be completely retracted into your body. Knowing that Diana was going to train with Cassie for a few days, Thea said this before she left to at least give her some ability to protect herself. Leaving Diana to teach Miss Cassie, Thea brought her secretary, Miss Maisie, a bunch of bodyguards, and financial lawyers to Gotham City an hour later. The departure of the reclusive families allowed her to regain a large amount of capital, and she needed to reconfirm her shares in Wayne Group. Old Lucius did not like her entering Wayne Group from a CEO's point of view, but the current situation left him with no choice. Although Thea's shares were not more than half, there was no doubt that she was number one. Today, money was just a number to her. She had personally come to confirm her shares, and another matter was to discuss the opening of part of Wayne Group's patented technology to the new manufacturing industry. This matter would definitely hurt Wayne Group's profits, but she guessed that Bruce would not object. Both parties entered the conference room, and she saw that the person who was going to negotiate with her today was Tim Drake. In public, Tim Drake was attending Wayne Group's meeting as Bruce Wayne's adopted son. Taking off his red combat suit, eye patch, and suit and tie, Tim really had the temperament of a rich young master today. He was handsome, cultured, and had a calm demeanor when he spoke. His rich knowledge and wisdom made him look like a young and creative leader. Everyone knew Thea's identity, but the members of the Bat family had two sets of identities. Even if they had just fought monsters on the moon, they had to pretend not to know her. After a few simple greetings, they finally got to the point. As for Thea's proposal to open up part of the patents to ordinary people to carry out manufacturing, Tim fully agreed. Although Wayne Group's economy would suffer, he believed that Batman would agree. Old Lucius did not express much of his opinion. "You have too much money and want to spend it. What does it have to do with me? I'm just an employee. Thank you for the support of Wayne Corporation and Mr. Drake. I will." Thea shook hands with Tim. Even though Tim was known for his calmness, he was still very nervous when this super beauty shook hands with him. Before Thea could finish her words, she suddenly felt an indescribable palpitation. This omen came without reason, like an irresistible hurricane blowing through her heart. On the ground, in the forests, there were countless cries, but the intelligent creatures did not feel anything. Everyone was living and working as usual. What was that? Thea was shocked and glanced at Tim beside her. Old Fox and the secretary didn't notice anything. They were puzzled as to why she looked as if she had seen a ghost. Something must have happened. She was very sure that the signal just now was transmitted to her by the will of the universe. However, compared to the consciousness of Earth 2, which was like a child, the will of this universe was like a titan. She did not understand much. Sia's first reaction was that someone had changed the timeline. Was it the Flashpoint incident? She looked carefully and found that her family was not affected at all. The development of Earth was still the same as it was a tenth of a second ago, stable and peaceful. Barry Allen, who was far away in Central City, was having dinner with heirs and discussing marriage. It definitely wasn't him. What the hell happened? A hurried phone call interrupted her thoughts. Tim gave her an apologetic look and picked up the phone. After saying a few words, he was also stunned. "Bruce is missing? What do you mean he's missing?" Thea heard the voice of the old butler Alfred on the other side of the phone. She couldn't suppress the doubts in her heart. The old butler had always been as calm as Mount Tai. Something big must have happened, or he wouldn't have made this call. "I'll go check on Boo. Lou, what happened to Mr. C?" The surface of the Bat Cave was full of lead, so she could only fly over to investigate. In front of a group of business elites from Wayne Corporation and Wayne Corporation, she activated the teleportation spell and reappeared in Wayne's old mansion. "Alfred, what happened?" She quickly found the old butler in the side hall. The old butler was anxiously making a call. "Thank God, Miss Thea. You came just in time. Hurry up. Come with me." The old butler panted heavily and couldn't say a complete sentence for a long time. Thea could only inject a small amount of magic into him to help him stabilize. The old butler panted for a while. "Master is missing." Sia's head was full of question marks. Who was missing? How did he disappear? "I went to get him coffee. It was only 2 minutes, and he disappeared into thin air. There was no battle, no signs of superpowers, at least I didn't see anything. Come with me." With that, he pulled Thea to the secret door. According to the old butler, Batman was studying something, but in the blink of an eye, a living person disappeared. Oh my God! Was Bruce sitting on this chair before? Thea felt a familiar aura as soon as she entered the Batcave. She quickly walked into the inner room and pointed to a chair. The old butler nodded eagerly. Thea felt that her expression must be very funny. She was completely dumbfounded. Although the aura here was disappearing very quickly, and the remnants were almost negligible, she could still determine that there were remnants of the Omega effect here, and even some remnants of her own obliterating eye. Her ray energy had stopped here before, and she was certain that she was not wrong about this. She looked around in a daze. "Are you sure it's not April Fool's Day? Are you all not teaming up to make fun of me?" Batman was studying the Omega Ray and her obliterating eye. Then, he lost himself? Master Bat had dug his own grave. The image of a red light and a green light intersecting each other appeared in Sia's mind, before they smashed into Batman with a boom. The siren had warned her that someone had sneaked into her sea of souls, but she didn't take it seriously. Now, the culprit seemed to be Batman. Why was this guy so restless? Even she, who could fight with Darkseid, found the Omega effect difficult to understand and chose to seal it. Where did Master Bat get the courage to study it himself? Even she, a god, couldn't decipher it. Did he think that he could figure it out with a wrench and a screwdriver? There should be a limit to his advanced technology. Looking at the empty chair and the old butler's expectant eyes, Thea didn't know if she should say something. Chapter 775. The old butler looked at her earnestly. Thea scratched her head. She had some guesses, but she was not sure if she was right. Batman Bruce Wayne was rich, had a house, his parents were dead, and he was a handsome middle-aged man. Other than having a son who was a burden, he was perfect in all other aspects. The world's consciousness would not alert him. He was just not qualified. A normal Batman could die 1,000 times. He could be killed by a car, choked on food, or smashed to death by a flower pot. It had nothing to do with the world's consciousness. Thea was sure of that. But it was related to the Omega effect and the Eye of Obliteration. His life and death were at the level of the rules. If it was not handled well, it would be a universal disaster. Thea interrupted the old butler. This is very, very complicated. I need to ask someone who knows. I can't explain it in a short time. If Superman, Diana, and the others come, tell them to wait for me. I'll come back as soon as I get the answer. She went to the new planet. The Heavenly Father was no doubt a wise man. Your Majesty, you know. After a simple greeting, she had just started when the Heavenly Father raised his hand to interrupt her. He looked at the guards around them. The question you want to ask is too big and too unbelievable. Let's not talk about it here. The two of them stepped out of the territory of the new gods. Walking across the abandoned land, he could still see traces of the battle between the Father and Darkseid a few months ago. Their power was ancient and pure, and time could not erase it. Once their power was unleashed, it would last forever. Thea was not as good as the Heavenly Father. Her sea of souls could not last more than 10,000 years. It was only a matter of time before it dried up. I'm glad that you can sense the changes in the multiverse. But I still want to ask you something. Do you really want to know the meaning behind this and the truth behind it? The Heavenly Father asked after walking for a long time. His tone was not very firm. How big could it be? Thea scoffed. You don't know that the cultists on Earth summoned the 3 palace demons, do you? Of course, their original plan was to summon Lucifer directly. It was just that he mistook Feng Jing for Maoyang. There were also some South American cult groups that summoned giant beasts. Miraculously, they actually succeeded. A group of heroes were knocked to the ground and called for their fathers. In the end, it was God who stepped in to save them. Courage was the unique talent of Earthlings, and Thea felt that she also had this talent. Her eyes were filled with determination as she nodded lightly, indicating that the Heavenly Father could tell his story now. Only Darkseid and I know about this. You're stronger than the gods, so you're qualified to know. But remember, don't tell the gods, not even Diana. Can you do that? The Heavenly Father asked. I promise I won't say anything, she said sincerely. Goddess Thea, do you know how the multiverse under our jurisdiction was born? Thea thought that she knew, but her actual level was probably not, so there was no need for her to show off. Weren't you and Darkseid the one who established it? Ha ha! The Heavenly Father laughed heartily. It was obvious that he was very comfortable with the flattery. After laughing, he quickly shook his head. There were too many bosses above him, and it was not easy for him to survive. Some flattery was enough to be enjoyed behind closed doors, but it was not to be taken seriously. How is that possible? You think too highly of me, ha ha. The Heavenly Father laughed again and said seriously, "Darkseid and I are only the representatives of good and evil. We don't have the ability to create the multiverse. The real creators call themselves the Watchers. Their power is far beyond mine, and they have power that neither Darkseid nor I can fathom. Goddess Thea, as the leader of the new gods, we only use our divine power and divine positions. The Watchers have long surpassed all kinds of rules. Their level is far beyond the new gods, and they are omnipotent and omniscient." The Heavenly Father's voice was a little heavy. He had worked so hard to get to where he was today, and it was hard to imagine that there were bosses above him. Thea had reservations about the Heavenly Father's words. The Watchers might be omnipotent, but they were definitely not omniscient. In her opinion, this group of Watchers was similar to Marvel's transcendental gods. Their power was boundless, but they were still one step away from being omniscient. This was evident from Darkseid's deliberate plan to confront the anti-Watchers. She lowered her head and thought for a moment. "So you're saying that what happened in the multiverse just now has something to do with them?" "It has something to do with them, and it has nothing to do with them at the same time." The Heavenly Father looked like he was going to have a long talk. Thea hurriedly pretended to listen carefully. The Watchers created the multiverse to monitor and record everything that happened in it, while the anti-Watchers destroyed the multiverse to maintain the number of universes within a certain range. From what I understand, this is a way to balance the universe. They are both forces of order. Thea nodded to show that she understood. In her opinion, although the anti-Watchers were reduced to dogs in the later stages, they were still the creations of God. She had seen the antimatter universe in a hurry back then, and although it was chaotic, there was still order. As far as I know, there is another force outside of the multiverse. They are called the Third Party. The Watchers, the anti-Watchers, and the Third Party. These three forces are intertwined. The Watchers and the anti-Watchers have always been on guard against the Third Party, but the gap between the universes just now gave the Third Party a chance. A multiverse that represents darkness has been born. The Heavenly Father's expression was a little gloomy. He had not even finished dealing with Darkseid, and now there was another wave of villains. He felt that the task on his shoulders was very heavy. The Dark Multiverse? The Third Party and Barbados? Thea combined the Heavenly Father's words and her own memories, then connected the whole story with Batman's incident. She finally had a clear understanding of the relationship between the two. If Batman was just an ordinary person before, be it in body or soul, he was very ordinary. However, from the moment he was mixed with the Omega effect and was used by the Third Party to build the Dark Multiverse, he was no longer ordinary. He had connected the multiverse and the Dark Multiverse. His body was still the same body, and his soul was still the same soul. However, in a sense, he, who had traveled through the river of time, was almost immortal. It was just that he did not know it. Thanks to him, the scale of the entire universe had automatically increased by a level. From the original parallel universe and multiverse, it had evolved into a composite universe. In the future, it could even become an omnipotent universe. Chapter 776. From the perspective of the universe and even the higher-ups, such as the Watchers, this was a cause for celebration. To them, the upgrade of the universe was like the corn in their field. The longer it grew, the better it was. Such a good result naturally had to be recorded and popularized on a large scale in the future. But from the perspective of an individual or a god, it was terrible to have a bunch of enemies for no reason. "Your Majesty, can we make a move first?" Her so-called goal of making a move first was self-evident. The Heavenly Father sighed. "It's not that I don't want to, but that universe is sealed up layer by layer. The flow of time inside is completely different, and we can't enter at all. Maybe 10 years, maybe 100,000 years, I can't say for sure when that universe will be completely open. The ability to create a universe is already beyond my limit. After figuring out the whole story, Thea resolved her doubts and prepared to leave. The Heavenly Father was a good boss, comforting her not to feel burdened. The Earthling you mentioned who was teleported away by the Omega effect must be found as soon as possible. The longer he wanders in the river of time, the greater the damage to the timeline. If he returns to the point of time he left by himself, the entire universe will be destroyed. Thea hurriedly asked why he said that. The Omega effect is the power of origin. It follows this human, and every time it teleports, it accumulates energy. If it follows the human's footsteps and returns to your point of time, it will form a paradox, causing an explosion at the source. The energy of this explosion will have no problem piercing through 3 or 4 universes, and the universe that bears the brunt of it will have no chance at all. Do you understand? Thea understood a little. Wasn't this a more advanced causal weapon? The ray shot out from the source followed the flow of time back to the origin, and the cause didn't produce any results. Instead, it returned to the cause. Boom, it all exploded. Now Batman was a human-shaped bomb, the kind that could blow up several universes with one explosion. She said goodbye to the Heavenly Father with a lot on her mind and returned to the Batcave. "Miss Thea, our master?" The old butler saw her and hurriedly asked. "Dead," she replied in a bad mood. The old butler is shocked. Thea doesn't want to embarrass the old man, so she explains carefully, "It's more troublesome than death. I don't have any clue." She had yet to figure out the Omega effect, and now that she had the Eye of Obliteration, no one knew what would happen when the two energies came together. Of course, Darkseid might be able to answer her questions, but it would be impossible even if she thought with her toes. The Omega effect would cause Batman to jump around in the river of time. One day, he would be in a primitive society, and the next day, he would wake up on the battlefield of World War II. The effect of the Eye of Obliteration was to erase a person's existence, making everyone forget that person. However, in the long river of time, Batman was the only one who had forgotten himself. He was definitely suffering from amnesia. Thea sighed. She could only analyze on a superficial level whether the convergence of the two types of energy would produce other effects. She really couldn't estimate the deeper effect. Traveling through time irregularly would lead to amnesia every time you traveled through time, and then amnesia again. Ordinary people would definitely die after traveling through time twice, but Thea believes that with Batman's tenacity, he would find his way home. Her mission was to stop him, or even kill him in the flow of time. If there was a glimmer of hope, she wouldn't do this. After all, they were old friends. However, she didn't have a choice. Between the universe and Batman, it wasn't difficult to choose. Bruce won't appear again. You should be mentally prepared. She patted the old butler's shoulder and left the Batcave. Traveling through time wasn't a problem for her, but it was unknown which point in time Batman traveled to and which timeline. It was completely inadvisable to blindly search for him. Thea didn't inform anyone. The people of the Righteous Alliance couldn't help with this matter. Diana was still teaching her disciple. She told the Valkyrie about a race of watchers. They lingered outside the universe and used the infant universe to power spaceships that were vast and magnificent than the Milky Way. They could destroy a universe with a raise of their hand and disinfect the universe at will. In their eyes, the gods were no different from insects in the fields. This was too much of a blow to their confidence. Fortunately, she had already set her sights on the highest. Otherwise, she would also have been devastated. She slightly released her soul power, and all the passers-by ignored her. Thea lay on the lawn in the center of the city. The warm sun shone through the clouds onto the earth. She smelled the fragrance of the green grass in her nose. The busy crowd walked around her. A sense of incompatibility welled up in her heart. "I'd better go home and think about it." Just as she was about to leave, a low male voice sounded in her ear. "I can help you. That's why I'm here." A tall man with golden hair and goggles in yellow and blue tights was standing not far away from her. Golden Vanguard? This guy is looking for me? Thea was a little confused. It wasn't that she looked down on him. With her soul power, she didn't want to be seen by others. Not many people could see her. Among those who could see her, there was definitely no Golden Vanguard. Especially when she realized that his gaze wasn't focused on her, she was even more confused. I can help you. That's why I'm here. Golden Vanguard said the same thing again. Thea didn't move. The ordinary people around her saw Golden Vanguard and started talking. Thanks to this guy's habit of being in the limelight, many people recognized him. Golden Vanguard, can you give me an autograph? Golden Vanguard, what are your criteria for choosing a partner? A few middle-aged women surrounded Golden Vanguard and asked him a bunch of questions. Amidst the noise, Golden Vanguard looked around anxiously. He stretched his neck and shouted twice, I can help you. That's why I'm here. Thea's interest was piqued. With a snap of her fingers, she teleported herself and Golden Vanguard out of the crowd at the same time. You're looking for me? Asked Thea on the side of the road. Golden Vanguard saw her and breathed a sigh of relief. That's right. I'm here to look for you. Trust me, I can help you. What can you help me with? With all due respect, I don't think you can solve my current problem. I can. You need to find Batman and I can help you, said Golden Vanguard with certainty. Thea looked him up and down carefully. With the powerful memory of a god, she noticed that this Golden Vanguard was a little different from the one she saw a while ago. There was a slight difference in his clothes. The key point was that this Golden Vanguard's eyes were not frivolous. Instead, they were filled with wisdom. You're another Golden Vanguard? The older version? You transmigrated here after the 25th century? She couldn't tell that this guy was also a transmigrator. Chapter 777. That's right. Your foresight is as good as ever. Please come with me immediately. I can't stay in the same timeline as my past, the elderly Golden Vanguard said urgently. Thea analyzed a lot of things in an instant. This guy knew her in the future and seemed to have a good relationship with her? She thought for a moment. I can't enter the timeline easily. If I enter the timeline with the divine position, the whole universe will be in chaos. I can only use my clone to enter with you. Please hurry up. I can't hold on for more than a few seconds. Thea didn't waste any more time. In the dense ripples, a clone walked out of her body. She didn't carry the divine power of the new god. Instead, she gave half of her magic power to the clone. The Golden Vanguard took out a sphere with a diameter of 2 meters from his belt and hurriedly went in. In less than a second, his body was already showing signs of blurring. Thea's clone hurriedly went in as well. The Golden Vanguard activated the controller. The sphere exploded with unparalleled energy and directly pierced through time and disappeared from the side of the road. Sensing that the connection between the original body and the clone was not blocked, she sighed and turned to go home. Thea's clone and the future Golden Vanguard began a great operation to find the old man who had lost his footing, Bruce Wayne. Even with the help of the Golden Vanguard, who came from a more distant future to help, there was still no result. At countless points in time, the timeline was like an airtight net firmly blocking the way and silently mocking them. Batman could be at any point in time, and they were painstakingly searching for him like looking for a needle in a haystack. 3 days later, she knew that she couldn't hide it from everyone. She could only choose to tell the Righteous Alliance. If Batman comes back, he will destroy the world? Green Lantern Hal asked in disbelief. Thea rubbed her head. The clone entering the river of time still had an impact on the original body. Her spirit power had not recovered by half and now it was flowing all the way. That's what the Heavenly Father said. I believe him. Everyone fell silent. The same question was in front of everyone. Should they sacrifice their friends or the world? The superheroes lowered their heads and didn't say anything. Although Batman had a lot of bad habits, they still felt uncomfortable when he suddenly disappeared. Since the few of them couldn't help much, Barry suggested that he might be able to lend a hand. Thea hurriedly pulled him back. "You should stay at home and think about marriage. Don't make trouble for me." Time flew by quickly, and 30 days and nights had passed. The deep-seated effects caused by Batman's disappearance had yet to be seen, and the short-term problems had finally surfaced. The Gotham criminals who were shrouded in fear of Batman had begun to show their faces. Whether it was Penguin Man, Scarecrow, or Two-Face, these were Batman's old rivals. They had a keen sense of smell. Even if no one told them, they could sense something. Batman was gone. Dead? The skies of Gotham had changed. At first, they only sent their subordinates to test the waters, but when they discovered that only a few deputies were attacking the criminals, and the terrifying black figure never appeared, the criminals began to party all night long. The new bureau chief was in a terrible fix. Thea sent a letter to the Gotham police station through the city government. It said that Sergeant Bruce Wayne was sick. Now that the new bureau chief had just been appointed, he had to take over such a mess. Needless to say, it was very depressing. The Justice League offered assistance, but unfortunately, it was rejected by Nightwing Dick Grayson, who rushed back to Gotham to take charge of the situation. Wayne's old house was still brightly lit, but the one sitting at the head of the table was now a young man. "Young Master Drake, have something to eat." The old butler brought a plate of food for the third-generation Robin. Unfortunately, his mind wasn't on it at all. He only waved at the old butler. At this moment, he was flipping through the Wayne family history with bloodshot eyes, and occasionally made some note. After 10 minutes, he rubbed his eyes. Miss Thea was right. Bruce did change some of the history. This Wayne family history book is not quite the same as what I remember. There are many bat marks left behind to guide us to find him. Batman is still alive. He's still waiting for us to save him, Tim Drake said softly, as if he was encouraging himself. The old butler sighed. Watching Bruce Wayne walk step by step until today, his sorrow was far greater than any of the other Robins. However, he wasn't as impatient as the young man. From Superman, Barbara, Diana, and the others who were close to Thea, he pieced together the truth. Once Bruce returned, the whole universe would explode. He didn't know how correct this view was, but he knew Bruce Wayne. He was a noble person. If he knew that he could cause such an outcome, even if it was only a 10% chance, he wouldn't have returned. In other words, Batman was actually dead. After a month of suffering, many people had already accepted reality, such as the criminals in Gotham and the few members of the Bat team. Barbara handed the title of Batgirl to the big lowly Cassandra. She once again became an oracle, pulling the Huntress and Tommy, who had rushed over from Star City. Laurel reformed the Raptor team. She was using her own method to protect Gotham and fulfill Bruce's last wish. Dick Grayson, who had returned once again, rejected the support of the Justice League. He used his Nightwing codename to shoulder the heavy burden, gathered the remaining members of the team, and went out early and returned late every day to fight the criminals. The only one who hadn't given up was Tim Drake. He still stubbornly believed that he could save Batman. The old butler couldn't bear to tell the truth, and could only silently accompany him. Not long after, it was late into the night. The secret door of the old house opened, and Nightwing Dick and Damian, who had changed into casual clothes, walked out. "Jason is too much. He's smearing Bruce's name. I must catch him next time." With his father's death, the brat Damian suddenly returned to his taciturn and unapproachable state. He coldly greeted the few of them and returned to his room to sleep alone. "Tim, I need you to help me. Damian's methods are becoming more and more violent. I don't want him to become another Jason Todd." Nightwing stood beside Tim, trying to make his tone less serious as he spoke. "Have you all given up? Are you just going to ignore Bruce?" Tim asked with a hoarse voice. Nightwing deliberated over his words. You don't understand the consequences. We have to make a choice. I know what your choice is. I'll think of a way. After saying that, Tim Drake closed his book and left the room. Nightwing poured himself a glass of wine and downed it in one gulp. He felt very tired. He was the first-generation Robin, Jason Todd was the second-generation Robin who killed indiscriminately, and the third-generation Robin who had just slammed the door and left. Batman's vision was really unique. Every generation of Robin had a frighteningly strong personality. Each person had a different idea. No one could convince the other. Chapter 778. Tim Drake walked out of Wayne's old house dressed like a nobleman. It was drizzling outside, and the rain washed over the city. Faint gunshots could be heard in the distance. In fact, as the third Robin, he was not as dispirited and uneasy as Nightwing thought. He was not a substitute for anyone, and he did not need anyone to command him. He had his own way of doing things. Nightwing lacks courage, and he doesn't dare to take that step. But I can. He walked around the Batcave and looked at the batsuits on the equipment rack, saying thoughtfully, Gotham did not care who was under the batsuit. He only needed the symbol. He quickly put on an old version of the batsuit and rode out of the Batcave on his motorcycle. Nightwing was troubled by Jason Todd. To Tim, this was simple. He just needed to take him down and put him in jail. Then, he would show the Batman suit to intimidate Gotham and stabilize the situation. Finally, he would focus on finding Bruce. This was the best and fastest way to solve the problem. That was what he thought, and that was what he did. The motorcycle moved silently through the streets and alleys, drawing arcs in the night. He planned to solve the internal problems first before working together to deal with the external problems. The first problem was to find Jason Todd, the second Robin before him. Unlike Nightwing, Tim had never seen Jason before. When he joined the Bat Squad, Jason had already revived and left Gotham. To him, the name was more like a symbol. Is it here? Tim fiddled with his watch and quickly found the information he needed. Unlike the previous two Robins, he paid more attention to the capabilities of technological product. Many alien technologies that had entered Earth had been studied by him. He did not have the cautious attitude of Bruce. In his view, whether it was alien technology or Earth technology, they were all just tools. The motorcycle stopped lightly, and what came into view was an abandoned factory. Thea's large-scale imitation of alien products had created countless jobs, but it had also destroyed more than half of the traditional manufacturing industry. Many people had changed their businesses in time to avoid bankruptcy, but there were also those who were stubborn. In just a month, they had been swept into the dustbin of history. The factory in front of him was one of them. Tim didn't care about what was produced here before. He only knew that Jason Todd, who he was looking for, was hiding under the factory. After he cautiously entered the factory, the soil not far away from him moved, and a huge dark red plant quietly drilled out of the soil. The layers of flower buds opened, and two beautiful women looked in the direction he left. One of them had red hair and wore dark green tights. The other woman was wearing a short-sleeved, narrow skirt and high heels. She was wearing glasses and looked like a beauty in the workplace. Poison Ivy and his secretary, Miss Maisie, were observing from the shadows. Thea felt that the Bat team would be at a loss if they lost their support. Considering that Tommy and Laurel would also join the fray, she sent Poison Ivy, a local from Gotham, to help them in secret. Hanging out with Sia every day, under the influence of her surroundings, the secretary, who was originally a straight girl but now completely turned gay, happened to be at Poison Vine's house. Since she had nothing to do, she took the opportunity to come over and take a look. Why is it so messy here? The secretary heard the gunshots in the distance and found it hard to believe. The whole world was busy, and there were people here shooting in the streets? Poison Ivy shrugged. How would I know? Let's go in and take a look. The plant behind her spewed out a pile of pollen. The secretary knew that the pollen was used to confuse people's vision, so she walked in leisurely. Tim Drake didn't know that someone was following him and left a lot of traces. The secretary, who had undergone countless training, casually followed him. The underground space was huge, and there were faint sounds of conversation. It's unbelievable. You actually built your own bat cave, Jason Todd. You shouldn't have usurped that cloak. What followed was a series of violent banging sounds. The sound was so loud that intermittent echoes could be heard from the thick and heavy ground. You shouldn't have come here. This isn't your masquerade party. A low voice said. I'm not playing a game, Jason. I'm here to arrest you. I won't allow you to smear Bruce's name. The two were soon fighting with punches and kicks. TSK. Look, these men are actually fighting for some false reputation, Poison Ivy said casually. The secretary wasn't so hostile to men. She took out the green light ring and used it to reflect the scene of their fight. Her combat ability could fight with Madame Shiva for dozens of rounds. The secretary's vision was much better than Poison Ivy's. As if she was watching a competition, she began to explain with interest. This Tim is very powerful. His strength and intelligence have achieved a perfect combination. His strong skills and agile thinking are indeed worthy of being the young talent that Batman values. Poison Ivy was very self-aware. If she didn't mutate, she would only be a university student who stayed in the laboratory. She couldn't be compared to Miss Maisie, who was a trump card that could take on dozens of fully armed soldiers. You think highly of him? No, he lost because Jason didn't show any mercy. One side went all out while the other held back. His ending is already decided. As if she had seen the ending, the secretary was a little disappointed. The sharpness in her eyes disappeared and was replaced with a vase-like smile. As the former bodyguard of Luther, who was good at courting death, her judgment was accurate. Although Tim came with an urgent desire to solve everything, he didn't kill his predecessor. On the contrary, the other side didn't have any scruples and didn't show any mercy. Realizing that he had made a mistake, Tim wanted to salvage the situation. Unfortunately, they were both Bruce's apprentices. Although their fighting styles were different, they were familiar with each other's move. At least, Jason was familiar with Tim's moves. On the other hand, Jason came back from the dead and wandered around the world for many years. He absorbed the essence of fighting from many sections. In countless battles to the death, his martial arts could be said to have improved a lot. His clever mind didn't delay Tim's fate of defeat. He had neither the belief of victory nor the moves to win. The result was self-evident. Your eyes are full of fear and confusion. You're the one who tarnished these clothes, Jason said as he clenched a bat dart and stabbed it into Tim's chest. What a ridiculous outfit! Taking off Tim's bat mask, he looked at the young face that was coughing up blood. He turned and left the battlefield. Tim only felt that his body was getting colder and colder. There were many fractures all over his body. The large amount of blood loss made his consciousness fade. He knew that he had completely failed. Chapter 779. Feeling extremely vexed, Tim Drake lay weakly on the ground, feeling blood continuously flowing out from his chest. He had failed Bruce's trust. He was not worthy of wearing those clothes after all. His eyelids grew heavier and heavier. Filled with unwillingness, he finally closed his eyes slowly. Has he fainted? The two beauties who were watching from afar discussed in a low voice. Let's wait for another 30 seconds. The secretary, who was experienced in killing, calmly pulled Poison Ivy back. The two of them dawdled for a while until Tim was completely unconscious. Only then did they walk out. The bromance between these brothers is really something. The beating was too brutal, Poison Ivy said as she took out a syringe filled with plant vitality and injected it into Tim's body. The secretary, who understood the structure of the human body, also used the green lamp's energy to repair his damaged body. Let's go and save his life. Let his companions worry about the rest. Let's catch up to that ruthless guy. If Gotham had a dark Batman, it would be quite interesting. Poison Ivy and the secretary put on their light rings at the same time, turned on their invisibility function, and flew up to track Jason Todd. Half an hour later, Nightwing, who had sensed that Tim was missing and realized that something had happened, followed the trail of the motorcycle and came over. Seeing that Tim had been beaten to the point where he was barely breathing after a long time, Nightwing was shocked and hurriedly carried him back for treatment. Nowadays, the medical cabins on the market had been upgraded to a very high level, and the one in the Batcave was not for sale. The robotic arm began to perform the surgery and transfused large amounts of blood. It was busy for 2 hours before the patient was saved. As for his successor, Dick understood Jason well. He knew Jason's intentions, and presumably, Jason also understood his thoughts. There was only one Batman. It was either this or that. There was no other way. If he did not accept the challenge, Jason would continue to kill. He had to stand up and fight Jason to the death. After leaving the Batcave, he contacted Barbara and found out about a few places in the city where the gangs were fighting. After some analysis, he headed northwest. At the same time, the two women who had been following Jason Todd in the sky were also talking. It's hard to imagine that this guy was actually taught by Batman. He watched as Jason Todd went on a killing spree. With 2 guns in his hands, he leaped onto roofs and vaulted over walls. He killed one person with a single shot, turning the gangsters into a river of blood. Poison Ivy was in disbelief. The legend of Batman had been a hot topic among the citizens of Gotham for a long time. As an ex-citizen of Gotham, Poison Ivy had talked about it with her friends over tea before she mutated. The principle of not killing was Batman's biggest insistence. However, his disciples had not followed his teachings. Your marksmanship isn't bad. I can tell that you've trained hard. The secretary didn't care about how many gangsters had died. She just wanted to analyze Jason's marksmanship from a professional point of view. The two of them had nothing to do, so they watched the performances and chatted for a while. Without Luther's harassment, the secretary seemed to have opened a door for herself. In addition, Poison Ivy was also a quick-witted woman. As the two of them chatted, the topic of what kind of props they should use at night went astray. That guy is here. The secretary's mental fortitude was much higher than Poison Ivy's. Even though her face was red from chatting, she still maintained her vigilance. She was the first to notice Nightwing Dick approaching from afar. Jason didn't have as good eyesight as the two ladies in the sky. Thankfully, Dick was here to end everything and had no intention of launching a sneak attack. He could hear the sound of the motorcycle from half a mile away. Humph! An unknown sound came from his nose. Jason went all out and finally killed all 19 gangsters. He put away his gun and stood there, looking coldly at Dick Grayson, who was getting off his motorcycle. Why did you have to be so ruthless to Tim? That's a strange question. He barged into my house. Of course I had to fight back. You know that he didn't mean any harm. We are family, Dick said angrily. Jason snorted, his lips curling into a contemptuous arc. Jason, you're a murderer. It seems like you've lost your last bit of conscience. Don't try to reason with me. You're not him, Dick Grayson. You're weak and pitiful. The spread of evil in this city is all caused by your hypocritical morals. Let me teach you what you should do. With that said, he kicked Dick's face with great force. Dick was 2 years older, and his body was at its peak. He had rich combat experience, so he raised his arm to block the kick. He didn't use the short stick he was good at, but instead, he used Batman's fists and legs to fight with Jason. Jason didn't use a gun either. He wanted to earn his own honor and wear that uniform. If there was a chance, he wanted to tell that person that he could do better. You're nothing without him thinking highly of you. Jason punched Dick in the right cheek, then kneed him in the abdomen. Dick's reaction speed was top-notch. When his abdomen was hit, he used the force to pull in his stomach and twist his waist, raising his leg high to kick Jason in the chin. Both of them held their wounds and looked at each other. He's our father. There's no doubt about that. And you've shamed him. Dick faked a move to fool Jason, then tripped him, and finally hit him in the face with his strong forehead. Jason felt his vision go black, and his vision and hearing were affected. He was still calm. He took out a small bottle and sprayed it in Dick's direction. Dick coughed violently in the pale yellow smoke. Cough, cough, the Scarecrow's fear gas? You must have stolen it from the Batcave, right? You're getting more and more unscrupulous. Face your fear. Jason kicked Dick in the chest, then ran 2 steps forward and punched him in the chest. When he was about to attack a third time, his right fist was grabbed by Dick, who had lost consciousness. Before I came here, I injected the Scarecrow with all the mutated viruses known to him. You didn't expect that, did you? No one he taught is stupid. Jason was caught off guard. He took 2 punches in a row and vomited blood. It's over, Jason. Dick kicked Jason in the chest. The second-generation Robin, who was known for his ruthlessness, was now half kneeling on the ground with a red hood. He didn't stand up for a long time. Dick walked over slowly. He wanted to grab Jason's collar and give him the final blow to end the battle. Unfortunately, he grabbed nothing. Yes, it's over, Dick. Rest in peace. Jason shot out a rope from his right hand and wrapped it around a tall building in the distance. He flew up, and when he was in the air, he pressed a switch with his left hand. Chapter 780. Boom, boom. Dick felt a huge tremor under his feet. How could he not know that the other party had already chosen this battlefield and buried explosives in advance? The previous gang war must have been deliberately attracted by him to numb him. Dick had a new understanding of his successor's treachery. He was not a person who would wait for death. At the critical moment, he threw out a rope and wrapped it around a tree in the distance. He borrowed the force of the rope to escape the explosion trap in a flash. Then, the two of them engaged in a mid-air chase. They faced skyscrapers that were hundreds of meters tall and ran through the streets and alleys. They did not have the skills of Thea and Diana. They were 2 ordinary people. If one of them slipped up and fell from a height of 100 meters, there was no chance of survival. However, the 2 of them were brave people. They fearlessly engaged in a race of life and death in mid-air. In the end, Dick, who came from a family of flying circus artists, was more skillful. The 2 of them stopped at the top of a high-speed train. Dick was 1 step faster and knocked away Jason's claw gun. The 2 of them stood still. Under their feet was a speeding train. The tracks that carried the train made loud clanging sounds. The sound was a little dull in the empty tunnel. The battle between the 2 of them had reached its final moment. "Circus performer, you've got some skills," Jason said. Unfortunately, the noise was too loud and Dick did not hear him. Jason chuckled and turned around to run in the direction of the train. Dick hurriedly chased after him. Before he could take 2 steps, he saw Jason take off his cloak and throw it in the direction of the wind in the tunnel. Dick panicked when his vision was suddenly obstructed. However, he quickly calmed himself down. This was his opponent's plan. The noise in the tunnel was too loud. His sensitive ears could no longer detect his opponent's whereabouts. Coupled with the cloak blocking his vision and hearing, he was in an extremely dangerous situation. Should we save him? Poison Ivy, who was flying over from afar, asked. After all, he was not good at fighting. No need, the secretary said firmly. The 2 women chose to stand by and watch. At the critical moment, they saw Dick suddenly explode with all his strength. He jumped up and kicked in the direction he estimated. He gave up on defense and gave up on his worries. Because they were on a train, if this kick missed, he might even lose his life. Fortunately, his judgment was accurate enough. As he expected, Jason chose to fight head-on. Just as he pounced, Dick kicked him with all his strength. No! Dick felt that he had kicked a human body. He took the opportunity to remove the cloak that was covering his eyes and saw that the train had rushed out of the tunnel and was traveling on the Gotham Canal. Jason Todd had lost his balance and tumbled into the river. "That guy won't die, right?" the two young ladies continued to whisper. "He won't die. Look carefully at his movements when he enters the water. I dare say that he has already predicted this." I couldn't tell. Batman's successor has finally been chosen. Then, the chaos in Gotham should come to an end. Let's go take a look at the Raptor squad on the other side. The two girls did not alert anyone and flew to the other side of the city. Nightwing touched the transparent door of the medical cabin. Looking at Tim, who was sleeping inside, he muttered to himself. "You think that I refused to wear the cloak because I was afraid, or because I couldn't bear to do it. Actually, both are wrong. I refused to take over the role of a mentor. He asked me to do so. In the message he left me, Bruce hoped that Nightwing and Robin could protect this city. I did so. Unfortunately, he is not an omniscient saint. There are times when he makes mistakes." Bruce underestimated Batman's position in the hearts of the Gotham people. Nightwing sighed and took off his mask, revealing a pair of tired eyes due to years of running around. After leaving the Batcave, he had been trying to get rid of the influence of this place on him. He wanted to leave the mentor's protection and go out on his own. Unfortunately, his efforts were in vain. He had to make a choice today. Would he continue to be Nightwing in Broodhaven, or would he be Batman in Gotham City? Looking at Tim Drake, who was relying on a ventilator to maintain his life, he knew that he had no choice. He resolutely took off the combat suit that represented Nightwing, revealing his strong muscles. Dick Grayson took a deep breath, clenched his fists, and reached out to take off the combat suit of the original owner of the Batcave. The idol of his early years, the shackles after that, and the recent pain were all thrown to the back of his mind. Wearing this suit, he was no longer Nightwing. Instead, he had become a symbol that would strike fear into the hearts of the criminals in Gotham. "Bruce, no matter where you are, please protect me." After saying that, he put on the cloak with devotion. From today onwards, he was Batman. Tim Drake woke up a day later. With the Poison Vine Lady's plant essence and the various treatments in the medical cabin, he recovered very quickly. After adapting slightly, he was able to walk. The blow this time was a little too big for him. After knowing that Nightwing had inherited Batman's mantle, he could not describe how he felt. He looked at the ceiling of Wayne's old house. Did he still need to stay here? Nightwing had already found his own path. Where was his own path? Walking out of the door, he saw a graceful figure walking slowly towards him from afar. "Miss Thea, is there anything I can help you with?" "Mr. Drake, Alfred said that you're injured and not in a good condition. He asked me to counsel you." Tim Drake tried his best to stand up straight. He had countless things he wanted to say, but he did not know where to start. However, his mind was indeed agile, and he quickly thought of a question. Is Bruce really hopeless? Is there no hope at all? Thea was silent for a while. "I hope the final answer is yes. I've known Bruce longer than you. Although we have different views, he's a person worthy of respect. I'll try my best to save him. However, when it comes to choosing, I can only choose this world and give up on him." Hearing that there seemed to be a glimmer of hope, Tim Drake hurriedly asked what he should do. If he could not find his own path, it would be a good idea to ask this mentor. Thea interrupted him and pointed to the old house behind her. "Let's go in and talk." Nightwing, "Oh no, Batman now. Actually, they don't miss Bruce any less than you do. You're all right, but the starting point is different." She seemed to be calm, but in fact she was quite tired now. Her doppelgangers were traveling in time one after another, and the burden was on her main body. She only needed to explain to these Mr. Robins once. After that, she should quickly go home and sleep. As the new Batman, Dick had been busy all night. When he saw her visit, he hurriedly came out. Damien was also woken up by the young lady. Not long after, the old butler walked into the hall and gathered to wait for her explanation. Chapter 781. Thea looked around and saw that everyone's gaze was fixed on her. Before we talk about Bruce, let's talk about Gotham. The chaos in the entire country is not as much as the chaos in Gotham. Recently, Gotham's crime rate has been high. In just a month, the number of citizens dying from unnatural causes has exceeded 200. Gotham needs to restore order immediately. If you can't do it, then the Justice League will have to intervene. The National Guard has gathered 1,500 people and is heading to Gotham. I can delay it for 3 days at most. After 3 days, there can't be such large-scale gunfights on the streets of Gotham. Milady slammed the table fiercely. Did she still want to talk about the spirit of the whole country? Gotham is dragging my wealth and divine power down. After explaining the current situation, Thea saw that everyone nodded in agreement, so she let it go. The number of criminals on the streets of Gotham was less than 10% of what it used to be. The reason why the Penguins and Two-Faced Men could survive until today and not be dragged to other planets to dig coal was because of Batman's interference. Throwing a living person to another planet was not something that could be done too openly. Death Knell had tried to play the game a few times, but they were all discovered by Batman at the time. That was why Gotham was in chaos today. Otherwise, if tens of thousands of people were dragged away, the 5 mafia families would not be able to do anything. Batman is a member of the Justice League. You have to attend the next meeting. Thea pointed at Dick and said. Dick nodded. This was something that he should do. Inheriting Batman's position would definitely bring about countless troubles. He was already mentally prepared. Thea thought for a while. The maintenance costs of the Watchtower space base were previously shared by me and Bruce. Now, hearing the question of money, Dick's face turned pale. He waved his hands. I'm poor. I don't have any money. Thea was very unhappy. This new Batman did not even have the superpower of being rich. What was the use of having him? She then turned to look at Damien. His biological son should be rich, right? Damien was just a brat and had no concept of money. He only knew that he could use his father's credit card and didn't ask about anything else. The brat gave her an ignorant look. Miss Thea, let's talk in private. The old butler hurriedly pulled her to the side. They talked about inheritance laws, inheritance taxes, Gotham's prices, and the impact of alien technology on mankind. Legally speaking, Master Bruce is still alive. The old butler's face was full of worry, expressing his helplessness. Thea slapped her forehead. She had forgotten about it. The old butler was right. She couldn't let ordinary people associate Bruce Wayne with Batman. 2 days ago, she had helped forge Comrade Bruce's medical record. The old butler tried to act pitiful again, as if they were going to beg for food next month. In short, they had no money. If you have the money, help me pay for it. Sia looked at this veteran actor and was speechless for a while. Your ability to cry poverty has already surpassed mine. You win. Fortunately, she didn't lack money now. Even if it was a huge hole, it wouldn't be a problem for her to deal with it alone for half a year or a year. All right, you pass. Let's put the matter of the Watchtower aside for now. Let's talk about Bruce. Bruce is in big trouble now. You all know that, right? The few of them nodded in unison. His memories are blocked and he's trapped in the turbulence of time. It can be said that he's in a very dangerous situation. But that's not what I want to talk to you about. Your father's mentor has now become an extremely powerful weapon. Once he returns to our current point in time with his own strength, a huge paradox will appear in the timeline. The entire universe will be pierced through. I don't know if you understand what I mean. The few young people who were valued by Batman were all people with outstanding intelligence. They could clearly hear Thea's unspoken words. Dick and Damien were already mentally prepared. They remained silent. The old butler couldn't hold it in. His eyes reddened as he hurriedly covered his mouth. Really, is there really no way at all? Tim still didn't give up and asked. I wish I could say there is, but there really isn't at the moment. Bruce and I are good friends. Although we have many different opinions, he's a great person. The world still needs his strength. I don't want to go to the end. To prove her point, she continued, my archaeological team found a fossil that has been preserved for about 6,000 years. It has the familiar bat mark on it. My clone is looking for clues on the timeline. Perhaps you've already sensed it between the lines of history. Thea looked at Tim. Even if Bruce has lost his memories, his caution is still in effect. However, he's like a stone thrown into a calm lake. No matter how light or small it is, the entire timeline will change because of it. These changes may be big or small, but the change here is definitely the biggest. After saying that, she circled her finger in a circle, indicating the changes here in Wayne's old mansion. What changes in our house? Dick and Damien were a little confused. They really couldn't see any difference. The timeline will start to cover the elderly. Your memories must be slightly different. Thea spread her hands. Batman moved through the timeline at a completely different speed. He had traveled through every minute and second here countless times. How could there be no changes at all? The young people didn't believe her. After a few casual words with the old butler, they realized the problem. The old butler's words didn't match. They felt that the old butler's words were similar, but they also felt that they weren't. The old butler looked a little confused. He prepared to speak with the facts and led them to the Wayne family's showroom. Thea didn't have anything else to do, so she followed him in. Wayne Manor occupied a large area. From a cultural point of view, it couldn't compare to the world-famous Chatsworth Manor. However, it was much larger, with a total area of nearly 2,100 acres. Excluding the few reclusive families, Wayne Manor was one of the most luxurious mansions in the United States. It was 2 times larger than Wayne's old mansion. There were too few people that Batman could trust. They didn't have any helpers, so the daily cleaning was done by the old butler. However, the old butler was so old that it was too inhumane for him to clean the huge manor alone. They usually had a fixed area of activity. The father, son, and disciple usually gathered on the west side of the manor. For a long time, Bruce Wayne didn't like the wealth that the family had accumulated through various means. He threw away the portraits of his ancestors far away. The showroom they were going to this time was on the east side. Walking through the long corridor, there wasn't much debris in the room, just dust everywhere. Alfred, who had undergone the strictest British butler etiquette training, was a little embarrassed. He would gossip from time to time to divert their attention so that he wouldn't be laughed at by Thea, a decent person. Chapter 782. At the end of the corridor, there were many statues, some guns, and swords hung neatly on the wall for people to see. According to the old butler, these were the famous spoils of war of the Wayne family's ancestors. Thea aside, even Dick and the others had never been to this area before. Please come in. The old butler took out a key and opened a thick door. The few of them filed in. He turned on the lights and removed the curtains on the portrait. Even the old butler noticed that something was wrong, let alone the few youths who were known for their sharp eyes. This, and this. They're too similar. Damien pointed at the portraits and said in disbelief. It was normal for him to find it strange because the ancestors of the Wayne family in the portraits all had generous faces, wide chins, and stern gazes. Excluding the factors of the painter, they looked 70 to 80% similar to Bruce. This result made him shudder. From a genetic perspective, it was possible for father and son to look similar, but it was too exaggerated for them to still look similar after 4 or 5 generations. It was not a monogamous reproduction. Once the female's genes were added, there would be obvious differences in appearance after 3 generations, and the ancestors in these portraits seemed to be carved out of the same mold. What did this mean? The youths looked at the portraits and felt a chill run down their backs. Thea was also gritting her teeth. The cause and effect that should have remained unchanged was completely messed up under the influence of the Omega effect. In the chaos of time, Bruce lost his memory. He was naturally close to his bloodline, and because of his outstanding leadership skills, he turned the tides in countless family upheavals and became the head of the Wayne family for several generations. He became his own ancestor and was written into the history book. This was his current problem. This person is holding a book with a bat mark on it. Tim pointed at a portrait that looked like a saint and said in surprise, "This person's clothes also have a bat mark." This person also has one. More and more evidence showed that even though Batman lost his memory, he still left behind many clues. It was not only for the team to find him, but also to save himself. Unfortunately, he did not know that his actions were destroying the entire timeline. "Why is there an empty portrait here?" Damien asked, pointing at a blank spot. "That's Thomas Wayne. The man who shares the same name as Master Thomas lived in the 1860s. He's a notorious cult leader. He's already been expelled from the Wayne family," the old butler recalled. "How is that possible? The head of the Wayne family in the 1860s was Joseph Wayne." "I remember it very clearly," Tim Drake asked curiously. "Joseph?" The old butler thought for a moment. "Young Master Drake, you must have remembered wrongly. In the 18th century, there were only 3 people named Joseph in the Wayne family, and none of them were the patriarch." The old butler firmly believed that he did not remember wrongly. Tim was very sure at first, but after that, he also felt dizzy. Damien coughed twice like a little adult, indicating for them to focus on the disappearing portrait again. The old butler was very concerned about this legitimate heir of the Wayne family and no longer bothered with Tim about Joseph's existence. "The family has very little information about this Mr. Thomas. They only mentioned that he seemed to want to summon a demon named Bashmos in the modern world." The old butler was not sure if these memories were originally there, or if it was like what Thea said, the timeline had changed and they had suddenly appeared in his mind. "Barbados?" Thea asked with an indifferent expression. The Wayne family and the dark multiverse were too deeply entangled. "My father is Thomas? This name is too good." She could not help but mock inwardly. The old butler slapped his forehead. "Yes, it's Barbados. I heard that he's a demon from an ancient tribe. A bat demon." At the mention of bats, he shuddered. Batman and the Bat Demon. Was all of this destined in the 18th century? Bruce returned to the past and left behind countless bat markings, pushing the entire Wayne family to worship bats? "Miss Thea, is that what you mean?" Dick's mind was the calmest, and he came up with a shocking answer. "It's not just that, Dick. If I'm not wrong, the cave full of bats that Bruce fell into when he was young was a sacrificial site set up by this fellow who tried to summon demons more than 100 years ago." Thea did not mention one more thing. Her memories mentioned that there were traces of demons in Gotham. When she arrived at Gotham at the beginning of the year, she even asked Barbara and Catwoman about it. The 2 of them denied it and said that they had never heard of it. Now that she was a new god, even if the timeline exploded, it would not affect her. She felt that if she asked about the demons now, they would have an impression of it in their memories. There was no need to add to their psychological burden. Barbados was still very far away from this universe. She said softly, "Eastern cultivators pay attention to cause and effect. From the analysis of this matter, Bruce is his own cause and effect. His fate was determined the moment time began to flow. You know the seriousness of this matter, right? This matter should be a wake-up call for you." Don't casually study things that you don't understand. Okay, I'm leaving. The world is very peaceful now. Gotham cannot continue to be chaotic. You should hurry up and return everything to normal in these 3 days. Thea said as she opened a portal to go back. Big sister. Damien called out to her. The naughty child hesitated. Can I go and find him? Thea was not bad to this eldest disciple. She rubbed his hair. If you enter the river of time, the Wayne family will be even more chaotic. Trust me, I will think of a way. After saying that, she took a step and returned home. Her doppelganger was still searching in the river of time. The burden on her mental strength was very heavy. Her main body could not do much. After taking a shower, she fell asleep. The Bat team's actions were quite fast. Dick Grayson put on the Batman suit and reappeared on the streets of Gotham. Damian also put on the Robin suit and became the 5th-generation Robin. Batman's deterrence was not to be underestimated. In just 2 days, the criminals all quieted down and went home to be good citizens. A week after Gotham was restored to order, a tombstone was placed in the Wayne family cemetery. It was a small and inconspicuous tombstone beside Thomas Wayne and Martha Wayne. There was no name, no date of birth or death, no burial. It was an ordinary stone that silently recorded the past of this greatest human hero. In order to keep it a secret, a few relatives and friends went to pay their condolences at different times. Thea did not go. After all, she still had to find the person in the river of time and even kill this person as a last resort. It would be too ironic for her to go, so she let Diana represent her. Tim Drake couldn't accept sitting around doing nothing. After he recovered from his injuries, he called himself Red Robin and left Gotham alone. In the American continent 6,000 years away from the main body, Thea, doppelganger, was running with the Golden Vanguard, elderly version. There was a group of barbarians with wild beast fur chasing after them. Woo woo woo! The barbarians shouted with unknown meaning. At least, Thea did not understand the content. She saw the leader of the barbarians, who was 2 meters tall, throw a sharp spear at them. Hey, have you been here before? Where is the cave you were hiding in? She still had her high attribute. Running a few steps was not tiring for her. Chapter 783. It had been many years since she was chased by a group of people. Her divine power was left in her main body, and her doppelganger had a large amount of magic power. She could destroy a few primitive natives with a wave of her hand. Unfortunately, this was the past, and she didn't know which of these natives' hundreds of generations of grandchildren would be a big shot, so she could only choose to run. She originally wanted to use an invisibility spell to fool them, but she didn't expect the tribe leader who threw the spear to be so sensitive that he saw through her and chased her for half an hour. It should be here. The Golden Vanguard controlled the watch on his wrist and said with uncertainty. Thea sighed. There's a ghost cave in this flat land. You and your younger version are as unreliable as your son. She didn't care about shocking the world anymore, grabbed the Golden Vanguard and flew up. Under the worship of a group of barbarians, they flew to the top of a nearby mountain. The Golden Vanguard controlled the watch and looked at her speechlessly. The time deviation increased by another 0.0012%. Thea waved her hand indifferently. The ancient people would be weird if they saw something, but they wouldn't die. Their destruction of the timeline was far worse than Batman's. You know my son? That's right, of course I've seen the famous Time Master, Rip Hunt. She looked around. This Batman was quite persistent. Every time he crossed over to the American continent, he would wander around the palm-sized future Gotham. His obsession was really deep. Hey, this is the 15th time point we've searched. Can the reinforcement of the timeline really work? Thea asked with uncertainty. Of course, you're the new god. Only the timeline that you walk through will be frozen. Even if we can't find Batman, we can still minimize the damage he does to the universe. The frozen time is very stable and won't change. We need to continue moving forward. The Golden Vanguard said as he took out the spherical time machine. Thea sat in it as well. With a boom, it broke through time and entered the river of time. Frozen time? That means there's an irregular time? How do you know all this? Thea couldn't see through the Golden Vanguard. In the past, there was only one universe in this world, and its timeline was fixed. After that, with the rebirth of the multiverse, or rather the rebirth of the 52 coexisting universes, some rippling wormholes were created, and many transmigrators entered the timeline through the wormholes, the Golden Vanguard said unhurriedly. Thea was shocked. The fact that the other party could accurately say the number 52 surprised her. The multiverse was not a neatly arranged display for people to see. They were intertwined and connected to each other. For example, the optical axis connected Earth 1 and Earth 13, the mic axis connected Earth 2 and Earth 3, the cemetery included Earth 3, Earth 13, 15, 19, 37, and so on, and the other world included Earth 4, 35, 39, 41, and so on. The mother box could open a passage. As for how many parallel universes there were, Thea felt that Uncle Da could give a specific number, but the Great Plains Wolf and the others might not know. The Golden Vanguard was just an ordinary person. He was neither 51 nor 53. How could he know about this? Who said that to you? Forgive me for being blunt, but I don't think you have such a strong vision. Thea was very serious. The fact that the Golden Vanguard could say this meant that there was a big shot behind him. Who was it? Was it from heaven or hell? Or was it a sleeper? The Golden Vanguard had a strange expression on his face. He stuttered for a long time before squeezing out a sentence. This part of my memory has been sealed. I only know that I am not your enemy. The control system suddenly chimed. The Golden Vanguard was overjoyed. I found the Omega's reaction. This time, we will definitely catch up. Thea was expressionless. This man had said the same thing during the previous 15 tracking attempts. Unfortunately, he had failed every time. When he was lucky, Batman had just teleported away. When he was unlucky, it was already more than 10 years after he had transmigrated. In short, the time machine that the Golden Vanguard controlled was just like him, unreliable. This should be the beginning of the 19th century, the era when cowboys were just starting to reclaim the land. Here, take it. The Golden Vanguard said as he took out a flintlock from under the seat. Remember, we can't use weapons that exceed the limits of this era. Thea played with the revolver in her hand. She had a hunch that she wouldn't need it. Sure enough, after leaving the River of Time, she opened the door of the cockpit and walked out, only to hear the Golden Vanguard exclaim, "Oh my God, where is this?" The two of them were on an island floating in the void, like a small boat on the sea. Up and down, left and right, there were slow and uniform dark blue waves, which were tributaries of the River of Time. The land on the island had been completely desertified. It was abnormally dry in their hands. There were no signs of life on the island, only emptiness and silence. Where is this? Batman has been here? The Golden Vanguard was completely confused. He continued to fiddle with his wristwatch as if he was grasping at straws. Unfortunately, he didn't find anything for a long time. Stop fiddling. If I'm not mistaken, Batman has been here before, but someone teleported him away. It wasn't the Omega effect, but a man-made teleportation, she said with certainty. After saying that, she pointed to the northeast corner. There's an extremely strong magic reaction in that direction. Let's go and take a look. With that, she flew up, and without waiting for the Golden Vanguard, she flew toward the magic reaction area. After flying for less than a minute, she stopped. The blood-red stairs extended to the top of the mountain, and a black castle was in the middle of the mountains. The Golden Vanguard also flew over at this time. He pointed to the castle. What is this place? Do you want to go in? I only know that this is the end of time. Someone interfered with Batman's random teleportation. Whether he had good or bad intentions, he did us a big favor. As soon as her voice fell, the castle gate creaked open on both sides. The open gate and the dark interior looked like a giant beast that could swallow the world from a distance. Deliberately mystifying, Thea said with a little contempt. This doesn't look like a good place. This was the Golden Vanguard, who hadn't figured out the situation yet. Thea wasn't so confused. From the moment she set foot on the island, the other party had noticed her. Of course, she also noticed the other party. There was a very strong archmage in the castle. She didn't care at all about the gloomy atmosphere created by the castle. She was the master of playing with souls every day. The atmosphere in front of her wasn't even worthy of carrying her shoes. She entered the gate, passed through the atrium, and came to a door that occupied a rather large area. She directly pushed the wooden door open and walked in with her head held high. A humanoid creature wearing a tattered black beggar's robe and a hood covered his face. His limbs were so thin that they were only skin and bones. He stood upright as if waiting for her. Chapter 784. The black-robed sorcerer had a vast amount of magic power in his body. Unfortunately, his tattered black robe made him lose a lot of points. If he were to walk on the road in this attire, he would be directly sucked in. The only highlight was the colorful staff in his withered left hand. The two peak sorcerers were sizing each other up. They judged each other's spells through their actions and words, calculated each other's strength, and simulated the order of casting spells in battle in their minds. As for peace, it was impossible from the start. The other party did not relax his spiritual power. He had his eyes on Thea's incomparably pure magic power. Thea also felt the inspiration of the thread of fate. There seemed to be some benefits to be had here. Who are you? Do you recognize me? The black-robed man spoke first. His voice was so unpleasant that it sounded like scratching glass. His language was not English. Instead, it sounded like another language that Thea was not too familiar with, the Atlantean language. Who are you? Don't you recognize me? Thea asked back. After a simple exchange of blows, the result was very satisfactory. Neither of them recognized the other. There was no psychological burden in fighting like this. The soul fire needed the support of the soul god's position. At this moment, her clone could not use it. However, she could still use the magic fire. She raised her hand and used her strongest attack, silver fire. The silver-white flame extracted from pure magic power, dragging a long tail of flame, crashed into the black-robed man like a meteor. The black sorcerer was a little out of Thea's expectations. This guy was as black as coal, but he was actually a water sorcerer. He raised his staff high, and seawater flowed out from the surroundings. The castle became a swamp. A purple tentacle stretched out from the water, stretched slightly, and smashed down on the silver fire. The silver fire broke the tentacle as expected. However, it had already consumed more than half of its energy. It was destroyed by the other two tentacles that came out from the seawater. Very powerful. Are you an Atlantean? I didn't know that they had such a powerful sorcerer still alive. Thea said calmly. She still had the upper hand in the test. Moreover, the Golden Vanguard could help a little, right? Probably, Atlantis? What's there to brag about? I'm Darkness Magistra. Young mage, have you heard of my name? The black-robed man could tell that Thea was not very old at a glance, which made him envious to death. She actually had such a huge amount of magic power at such a young age. Something in the darkness? This naming method is so ancient. Thea pursed her lips. Thousands of thoughts collided in her mind. She searched for this name in her memory, and she actually found it. This king of darkness had a common acquaintance with her, the first king of Atlantis, the chosen of Poseidon, the one known as the king of death. If he remembered correctly, the mage in front of him was the father of that old zombie, the god of death. Tsk. His son was a zombie, and his father was a mage? What a family! Thea pretended to be nonchalant. I've heard of it. Back then, you might have been able to dominate the world. But now you're too old. She began to quickly mobilize her magic power and shot out endless silver flames. Silver light flickered, and countless magical flames bombarded the dark magi. Seawater? The seawater evaporated. Houses? The houses were overturned, and before the bricks and pillars fell to the ground, they were burned to ashes by the flames. Finally out. More than half of the seawater evaporated, and the monster hidden under the water revealed its face. This thing looked like a huge octopus, and its tentacles were thousands of meters long. The whole house, and even the floating island in the void, was made of rocks piled up by its huge body. The monster did not have a head or a face, but at the part where all the tentacles were connected to the torso, there was a big mouth with a diameter of 10 meters. The sharp teeth were divided into 3 layers, densely covering the whole mouth. Its breath was distant and mellow, like a giant beast that had existed since ancient times. Its energy was too strong. Not to mention Thea's clone, even if the original body came, it would not be able to defeat this thing. Fortunately, its energy had been amplified countless times in the river of time, but at the same time, the flow of time had also washed away its intelligence, which was not very high to begin with. Its body was too strong, but its soul was too weak. This sea monster could be said to be half crippled. Even the old ancestor of Atlantis behind it could not command it. A sea monster? Or a sea monster with the time attribute? Thea clicked her tongue in amazement. She did not know if it was an ability that she originally had, or an ability that she developed after soaking in the river of time. Gold. Vanguard. The young lady was just about to call for Gold Vanguard to help, but she saw this handsome guy, who seemed to have a big boss behind him, being dragged out by the giant octopus like a dead dog. Thea wanted to kick him to death. You're just here to cause trouble, aren't you? Why do I have to spend effort to save you? The dark wizard's face could not be seen clearly, but the silent mockery could be felt by anyone. His magic was strong, the sea monster was too strong, and he had a hostage in his hand. With these 3 factors, this young wizard had no hope at all. Thea did not care about the dark wizard's thoughts. She took out the fortune bow and casually shot an arrow at the dark wizard. He did not know why she did not use magic, but instead used archery to decide the winner, so the dark wizard chose to watch carefully. He raised his hand and a blue ripple appeared, blocking the arrow. Unfortunately, he underestimated the power of the divine bow and arrow. The arrow pierced through the shield and headed straight for him. He could only use the divine staff in his hand to block the arrow. Thea felt that it was a pity. She had already seen that the dark wizard's key to controlling the sea monster was the staff. Her trade deity position was not above her doppelganger, and she only relied on the divine power in the bow. The probability of this force trade was a little low. However, she was not in a hurry. As long as there was a chance, it was fine. If 1 arrow was not enough, she would shoot 10 arrows. If 10 arrows were not enough, she would shoot 100 arrows. What happened next completely confused the dark wizard. It was supposed to be a battle between wizards. How did it become a battle between an archer and a wizard with a pet? Thea was very agile, and she had the style of an elven archer. She was calm as the octopus monster's tentacles hit her, and she used all kinds of angles to shoot at the dark wizard. The sea monster was very powerful, but its brain was already muddled. Even the dark wizard, the original owner, could not control it. The most he could do was to issue a general order, such as attacking a certain area. Only then could he mobilize some of the sea monster's power. The sea monsters were so stupid that they only knew how to attack in a dull manner. They did not care about the effect or the terrain. The castle, which was originally in good shape, was torn to pieces. Thea was very agile. In just 10 seconds, she had already shot hundreds of arrows at the enemy. The divine arrows were so powerful that ordinary magic shields could not block them. The dark wizard could only hide behind the sea monster as if he was playing hide and seek. It was supposed to be a high-level magic battle, but it felt like a third-rate shooting movie. The giant sea monster was a natural cover. One person jumped out from the gap and shot 2 arrows. The other person hid behind the cover and waited for the right time to come out and cast 2 spells. Although they were fighting back and forth, Thea still had the upper hand. Her reaction speed and all her attributes were higher than the dark wizard's. Moreover, her arrows were endless, and the dark wizard's magic power was limited. The dark wizard secretly analyzed the situation and also analyzed this disadvantage. In his opinion, Thea wanted to use this method to exhaust his magic power. At first, the dark wizard would attack from time to time, but he did not fight back. He hid behind and ordered the sea monster to attack fiercely. Chapter 785. He was trying to save his mana, and the opponent was not able to defeat him for a long time. She would definitely change her mentality. As long as she made a mistake and got hit by the sea monster, the situation would be completely reversed. The wizard thought that he had seen through the opponent's plan. He could not follow her rhythm. In addition to strength, he also needed to compete with wisdom and mentality. He had lived for so many years, so his mentality was definitely better than Thea's. He was very calm. The magic shield was useless against the divine arrows. In order to save his mana, he did not use the shield to defend himself. He could not block it anyway. Whenever an arrow was about to hit his head, he would hide behind the sea monster. If he could not dodge, he would block it with his divine staff. He wanted to see who could outlast the other. Thea saw that the opponent was very cooperative. She was stunned for a moment, but she did not think too much about it. She continued to shoot arrows like a meteor chasing after the moon. The wizard thought that he had succeeded. He waved his staff like a windmill, blocking left and right. His gloomy eyes were full of mockery. Thea ignored him and continued to attack according to her own rhythm. The wizard was also very calm. The two of them attacked and defended. It was very boring. What was the opponent planning? After blocking 5 or 6 arrows in a row, Thea's attack was like quicksilver flowing down the ground. The wizard muttered in his heart. He had never seen such an unpredictable opponent in his life. He had a bad feeling in his heart. Should he attack twice at the right time? The wizard thought to himself. Soon, he gave up the idea. No matter what the opponent was planning to do, he would be in an invincible position. He made up his mind to fight a protracted battle and blocked another arrow. Suddenly, his hand became lighter. Where was the staff? The wizard was shocked. The staff that was originally more than a meter long was in the opponent's hand, and he was holding a gem in his hand. What was this? He used his power of the will to examine the gem carefully. With his attainment as a great wizard, the principle of gem magic was as simple as looking at the lines on the palm. He understood everything at a glance. But how did this thing get into his hand? How did the staff get into the opponent's hand? He was very puzzled. Sia chuckled. Exchanging a gem with a 30-year lifespan for a tattered magic staff, the other party was actually making a profit. To this dying mage, life was priceless. He scanned the magic staff with his power of the will. It had a very crude design, and its value could not even be compared to the god of death's magic staff. Its only function was to control this huge sea monster. In order to prevent himself from falling into the flow of time, the wizard had transferred his power of the will to control the sea monster into the magic staff. However, because the sea beasts had been washed away by the river of time, this staff, which wasn't made of the best materials, had been badly damaged. No wonder the control effect is so poor. Thea curled her lips. She did not immediately erase the wizard's power of the will imprint. Otherwise, the sea monster would lose control, and even Thea would be in trouble. Fortunately, she had gotten her hands on it in advance. Otherwise, it would be a big joke if the other party died together with her at the critical moment. I'll keep it safe for you. Thea kept the staff in her space ring as the other party roared in anger. I'm going to kill you. The wizard casually threw away the gemstone and no longer cared about the consumption of magic power. Like a shrew, he opened his arms, and the surging sea water surged as he charged towards Thea. You're talking as if I'm afraid of you. Thea ordered the sea monster to retreat. Her 5 fingers moved lightly, and one by one, lifelike giant silver-white firebirds were created. Then, the firebirds danced in the wind like a group of elves. They cheered, jumped, and were full of rich magic power as they rushed forward. The wizard's spell was indeed unique. Countless strong lights flashed in the sea water under his control. With just a sweep of the light, the firebird was reduced to the purest magic power. Then, with a big wave, the magic power was sucked back into the sea water. Very good. Thea nodded. The opponent's magic was both offensive and defensive. It also had the magical effect of absorbing the opponent's magic power. It could be said that the understanding of magic was at its peak. However, she was not afraid at all. Ordinary mages could not do anything, but she was a god. She could not use her divine power, but her vision and knowledge were still the same. Thea softly uttered an obscure syllable, and the wizard's sea began to flow back uncontrollably. The waves rolled and rolled back to its original owner. The wizard was shocked. He checked his magic mark and found that there was no problem with the casting step. He knew that it was the enemy's doing. He made a prompt decision and cut off the part that was out of control. He controlled the rest of the sea to reform into a huge sea snake. The sea snake was more than 100 meters long. Its dark green head was aimed at Thea, and it was going to swallow her. Boring! Thea's clone did not bring the holy sword, but she did bring the father's short sword. She held the short sword tightly and aimed at the snake's head. A huge light screen as bright as the sun appeared. The light screen turned into a crescent-shaped slash in the air. Thea felt that if she shouted something like "Crescent Moon Tensho," she would be very childish. The sea snake's head was directly cut off by the crescent-shaped slash. The wizard did not care. It was not difficult for a magic creation to grow a new head. Unfortunately, he cast 2 spells and nothing happened. He then looked at his sea snake. The cut was very smooth, and there was a faint silver flame burning in the dark green water. The wizard did not see the difference between the father's fire of justice and Thea's fire of magic. He was still trying to extinguish the fire with conventional methods, but no matter how much magic he poured on it, it was useless. The fire of justice was stimulated by magic, and it burned even more vigorously. Another divine artifact? The wizard was a little confused. Previously there was a divine bow and arrow, and now there was a divine short sword. Were there so many divine artifacts in the outside world now? Thea did not care about what he thought. She killed the sea snake with 1 slash and aimed her left hand at the wizard. She wanted to end the battle with 1 strike. Several complicated incantations were spat out from her red lips, and her eyes shone like stars. This was a sign that her spirit had reached its peak. Wizards were not idiots, and they would not just watch her cast a spell. The remains of the sea serpent were decomposed into seawater. The dark green seawater was mixed with the wizard's magic power and became as dark as ink. The black water emitted a foul smell, and the air became green. A tsunami of poisonous fog rushed towards her. Thea did not block it. Every time the poisonous fog was close to her, she would teleport away. In just 10 seconds, she teleported 31 times. Under the wizard's anxious eyes, she was finally ready to cast the spell. With a soft crack, the several layers of magic shields that the adept had prepared were shattered into pieces. A faint thread connected the 2 of them, and the wizard only felt that his consciousness was a little scattered. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.